And then get it out of your system.
You are being recorded.
Yeah, true.
Just let you know,
It announced.
Just,
Yes. It's the little things in life. That makes such a big difference.
Andrew, was Lori gonna come down and join us, or is she?
When I was up getting my copy of the packet, she was on the phone. So
Oh.
I'm assuming that she was.
All right. Nope. Private bell, and it is 6 p.m. I call this regular meeting of City Council on February 6th, 2024 to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Tom. Here. Councilmember Best.
here.
Councilmember Lynn.
Here.
Councilmember Hill. Councilmember Edwards.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Clark.
Here.
Mayor Green.
Here. All right, now we have the optional pledge of allegiance or moment of silence. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now we have approval of the agenda. Anything anyone would like to add or strike from the agenda? Which is not bad today. All right, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Thomas seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay. Presentations and discussion. No, I'm sorry, I'm leaping ahead. I am bound and determined to be done when I said this meeting would be done. Housekeeping matters.
Yes, I have one. I had intended to reach out to some of y'all to schedule a meeting to talk more about the Regional Housing Authority. But I figured maybe it'd be worthwhile to just have everyone on city council be included into that. After some more interest showed up, so I'd like to discuss that in the calendars update and try to schedule something out. As maybe not a workshop per se, but at least. Maybe it is just a workshop, but something related to a meeting for any council member interested with no quorum required. Catch up of what the Leadville Lake County Regional Housing Authority is, how it operates, and what we've done so far, and how we got there.
Could we have it as like a discussion item or?
Yep, so, we can. Let's see, we could do that, we could have it as a discussion, so the next meeting, assuming not everything gets bumped, is gonna be a busy one. But we could also just remember that, and I was gonna do it in my city administrator's report, that the 13th, that Tuesday, so next Tuesday is your additional city council member training with our CIRSA general counsel, so that Tuesday wouldn't be available, but we can also just pick a Tuesday. March 12th, you're gonna have a work session, so.
How
Is there a
long is
particular
the,
date?
how long is the training on the 13th?
Oh, I've got a call with the general counsel tomorrow. I think you said about the same length as, I would estimate this about the same length as Hillary's training.
So if it's about an hour, you could tack 20 or 30 minutes onto the end.
I like it.
Yep.
Yeah, me too.
I'm cool with it.
Cool.
Okay, so we'll just have to remember when we notice that, meeting that we want, add, what would the description of that be?
I don't know, it could literally just be, description of the Leadville Lake County Regional Housing Authority and discussion about Leadville Lake County Regional Housing Authority. All I'm going to cover is basically from the beginning of why was the Regional Housing Authority started? What is it? And how we're using it now. And then hopefully that will be enough to kind of catch everyone up to speed with what's going on to the state and what.
I would just offer slight modification to maybe background and
Sure.
discussion, that way we know that it's just educational, and then a discussion about it, where we go from here.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so,
Fantastic. Any other housekeeping matters?
I'm curious, who's responsible for snow clearing on the sidewalk along Poplar going towards Safeway? I think it's outside of city limits. So I don't think it's the city, but,
Which side?
the west side where there's a sidewalk when it's not covered by snow.
well, the adjacent, I would have to check to see what the county's requirements are. So we have snow removal requirements for Harrison and then the block to the, off of Harrison to the next alley. But we have snow removal requirements in the rest of the city, so I don't know
Yeah.
if the county has snow removal requirements adjacent to their businesses or not.
Yeah, I'd like to look into that. That is a really important pedestrian corridor. And snow hasn't been cleared and it doesn't look, it's not in city limits, so I don't think it's city responsibility, but it's pretty dangerous for people to walk towards Safeway and back right now. I'm wondering if it's CDOT or county or probably not CDOT.
Yeah, Matt.
They
Uh,
clear
No, we have maintenance responsibility from the curb to the building, along our portion of Highway 24. So, but,
on the rail yard side.
no, I mean, I don't think that's ours. I would have to check on the rail yard section of it. I know, the CDOT doesn't maintain sidewalks.
Right.
Period.
Okay.
That is local jurisdiction. We, I know, have that jurisdiction fall on the adjacent property. So
Okay.
I'll tell you for sure, it's not CDOT.
Okay, so, and then, is this okay if I ask another one? So along Harrison, it's the property owner's responsibility to clear snow on Harrison and then to the, on the
Yeah.
100 block or
No, it's not the whole 100 blocks to the alley.
to the alley? Okay,
Yeah, it's just to the alley, going east and west.
and if we have concerns about that not happening, what's the best way to address it?
They'll let me know.
Let you know? Okay.
Yeah, so they have 24 hours, so we do get complaints, and this is one of the things we'll keep pushing out, information about to people, is we'll get complaints and it hasn't even been 24 hours, so once the last accumulation, so obviously that's subject to interpretation, but once the last accumulation has finished, then the property owners have 24 hours. So we have had the community service officers go out, we've had officers go out, go door to door. We definitely try and pester folks to get it taken care of. I'm not sure everybody always is as prompt as we would like them to be.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
But I
I've
have,
seen-
the people have brought things to my attention. I did talk to the property owners of the properties that people brought concerns to me about, and I mean, to my face, they agreed to do it.
Yeah,
And we do have on ordinance that,
We can,
that requirement and the whopping fine of $25 if
yeah.
they don't.
And that's something we can think about it. It's, right now, the penalty for not doing snow removal is that you can charge them $25 or, we can do it and then charge them the $25.
Hmm.
So we all know it probably costs more than $25 to, clear snow, especially if it's turned into ice.
Yeah.
So.
Thank
So
you.
that's something we can look at, if we need to incentivize that behavior, we can think about ways to incentivize it.
I will say related to your first question, I seem to remember that former Mayor Labe had mentioned that CDOT occasionally, the truck drivers individually will choose to lower their side plow. That could help with the sidewalks, so sometimes it's cleared that way.
No, not sidewalks, sometimes we have a, agreement with CDOT that we'll maintain 24, we'll plow
Yeah.
24, but sometimes if they're rolling through town, they'll just drop the blade and do us a favor and plow as they're going through town, but that doesn't help the sidewalks.
Where I thought I had remembered him saying that they did that, but maybe I'm misremembering.
No, CDOT's very clear that they don't do anything, beyond what would be considered the curb.
Yeah.
Weeds, maintenance, all that falls on the local jurisdictions.
Okay. Other housekeeping matters? Well, then let's move on to public comments on items not on the agenda. Steve, why don't you kick us off?
Some good time, thanks you. Okay, it's on the floor. Steve Prestash, 131 East Third Street. The acronym for forced unlawful copulative kinship is being displayed by a business downtown twice. Now, that violates the obscenity, we have some kind of rules against obscenity in town. The other thing that it violates is, it talks about the Supreme Court and, utilizing that term, in what you could consider, not following the Constitution and, airing a grievance in a reasonable manner. Now, I stand to be attacked on this complaint because, I'll give you an example. When I was working at the food bank, part of my job was to help, as I was stocking food, help maintain order and not let people jiff in line. And I remember an individual, she was Hispanic, as this property owner, chided me. She said, "I bet you don't like immigrants either." I said, that kind of almost made me smile. I said, "Well, my mother was an immigrant, my father's parents were immigrants." And then she apologized. I think part of that was to either make me cower and start talking about how liberal I was. But the thing is, complaining about the Supreme Court in such a manner does not show proper respect for the Supreme Court. Even with Judge Clarence Thomas in mind, his failure to act in a reasonable manner, I'm not putting signs up that are obscene. So I would like to see City Council take some kind, or code enforcement, take some kind of sanction on this language. This is obviously obscene language. It's not freedom of speech. It's not reasonable. So thank you kindly.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments for items not on the agenda? Please come up and tell us your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Sean Moran. I'm a resident of the rail yard. I once again find myself here pleading for the council's help. Residents of the rail yard are caught in a dispute between the city and the developer concerning plowing. I appreciate the segue. The developer says he has a signed letter from the city stating the city will plow. And the city, through staff, has said that the city plows as a courtesy. But since the streets have not been probationally accepted, plowing is a developer's responsibility. I'm a taxpayer. I've paid my taxes in the rail yard. That's not a courtesy, that's compulsory. The residents of the rail yard are being punished because the city, via this council, opted to extend the completion dates for the public improvements through September of this year. That was supposed to
Sorry,
be done
that is not, that's a false, so keep going.
This was against the wishes of the residents of the rail yard and done so because the city has mismanaged the escrow fund for said improvements. That mismanagement has continued when $50,000 was dispersed without proper documentation and approval. Staff and council both reported the developer was belligerent and intimidated the former finance director into releasing these funds. As I understand the law, that's a class 4 felony that warrants an investigation. We've watched the contract be breached over and over. Parks, drainage, sidewalks, and those are just a few of the items. Yet still, there's no enforcement on those. We're not holding the developer's feet to the fire and finding him. But now the homeowners, the people that have bought there are being penalized. Your own constituents, the people paying staff and council salaries. Rail yard residents pay for and deserve the same services as everyone else who lives within the city limits. That includes the fire hydrants that were not even connected to water mains. I hope that makes your eyes pop. Plowing and the ability to rest assured knowing that we can get to work, stores, recreation, and receive police, fire, and EMS assistance without the hindrance of unplowed streets. The fire hydrant issues were discovered in December 2023. That is nearly 3 years after the first residents moved into the rail yards. Some of them remained bagged out to this day. Why is he allowed to continue to work? A stop work was issued for drainage. Our health and safety in the rail yard must matter to this council. We had one plow come through on that big heavy storm 2-3 weeks ago. That was Saturday morning, very early. 3 feet of snow have fallen since that point, and the roads remain untouched. Days and weeks afterwards, we can't even get a courtesy pass through the neighborhood to take care of our streets. How many times does the city get to say to us in the rail yard, oops, we'll get it right for the next phase? It's time to own the mismanagement, the shortcomings. The council has the power and the obligation to serve all the residents of Leadville. We pay our taxes. We want you to do that job. I ask the council to provide the plowing as a requirement and not a courtesy via a motion and a vote. The service is already funded with our money. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments on items not on the agenda? Anyone online? I was gonna say that little hand looks like, okay. All right. Thank you for your comments. Now we're actually at the consent agenda. And that is essentially the approval of the minutes from December 19th, 2023. Has everyone had an opportunity to look over them? No one has any corrections? Would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, please.
Luna Led moves to approve the consent agenda.
On the seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? No. All right, presentations and discussions. Take it away, city administrator.
Okay, choking as I'm trying to get this ready. Okay, a couple of follow-ups. One of the questions last time was about the fingerprinting machine in the police department. So the bad news is the current one is broken and cannot be repaired. Our IT person has worked several times to erase it, restart. It is not functioning. And so what we've done is we've reached out for quotes on a new fingerprinting machine. They are quite expensive. The quotes we've gotten are from $12,000 to $16,000. So there's some investigation that we're doing about what type of imaging is exactly required by Colorado Bureau of Investigation for fingerprinting machines. And we have to get, a version that can take the palm as well as the finger. And so what we're looking into is it really that we have to buy a $12,000 to $14,000 or $16,000 machine? So we're looking to get other quotes, and we're looking into what are the requirements exactly on a fingerprinting machine at this point. So right now that is being worked on. Well, other things. Council member training is next Tuesday, 6 p.m. here. So that is with our sorry, okay. that's with our, you know what, I'm actually gonna pass and go get some water so that I can continue.
Do you want us to pick up the city holiday discussion and circle back to you?
Well, I'm supposed to tee that one up. Hold a second.
No choking allowed,
What's that?
no choking allowed.
I guess I got stage fright.
Okay, I'm gonna throw in just a quick mayor's report because Rose Horning, our local high school senior, is now back from Korea, where she was at the Junior Olympics for representing the US for Nordic skiing. She had just a fantastic trip. Her top results were 13th in a 7.5K race out of like, I think 72 something. And then she was selected to be part of the mixed relay where there were 2 young men and 2 young women representing the US, and their team came in 5th out of 24. So my heart is full, but wait, there's more, but I'll pick it up at the end of the meeting, so just sit on the edge of your seats for that one.
Okay. So council member training from our Sursa General Counsel, Sam Light, on February 13th. So here, city council chambers. So this is going to be somewhat similar, could cover some of the same material as the one by, you know, our city attorney, but it is, his training is focused on ethics and liability, best practices. So that is next Tuesday. Just another update, little unfortunate news that the Tabor home, so you know that the city owns the Tabor home. In addition to the home, there's an office on the back side of that building that we have been letting the Main Street director use. Unfortunately, due to a boiler issue, that office flooded. Yeah, so they're in the cleanup of the water damage. We unfortunately found a subflooring, which is tile, which you all know potentially what that has in it. So we determined there was asbestos in that tile that needed to be remediated. So when the company went out to remediate the tile, they found additional water damage. So the scope of cleanup for the Tabor office, Tabor home apartment, is going to be kind of substantial. I am assuming, we filed an insurance claim, I'm assuming that the water damage itself will be covered. The asbestos is, I haven't looked at our policy yet to see if it's covered. But the cleanup and remediation of the asbestos alone might be $16,000. So it's unfortunate news. You know, the Main Street Executive Director is not using the office now at this point, but the water damage, I believe, has mostly been cleaned up. There may be some drywall still that needs to be dealt with, but the asbestos has been remediated, and now we'll just have to, you know, redo the drywall and re-carpet. So
the remediation's already been done.
correct. Remediation was done over a week ago, I think. It was over a Friday, Saturday, and
The
Sunday.
remediation of both the asbestos and the water damage?
Well, all the water damage has, the reason I'm hesitating on is that I think there might be still some drywall that may need to be cut out, but I can't, I'm pretty confident the majority of the work has been done and now it's just reconstruction.
Did we actually have somebody test it,
Test,
the asbestos?
to make sure it was asbestos or, yeah, it was tested. The water cleanup crew determined that it was asbestos and they called out their subcontractor.
Okay, thank you.
So that is. Okay, let's see, some other things I just wanted to update on. So acting chief Breyer has been working very hard on the police department policies and some training. And so, as you know, we use Lexipol, which is essentially a software company for our employee manual and our SOPs for the police department. You know, we're also looking to implement that for our city hall and rest of the city, but Lexipol is a fantastic program and they can push out daily training bulletins. We have not previously been using this feature, and so Acting Chief Breyer has been pushing that out so that the employees are, he's reestablishing that, so each daily training bulletin is a quick scenario-based training lesson designed to reinforce knowledge of department policies. Each one takes less than 5 minutes and are mandatory for post-certified officers, so we're pushing that out. Acting Chief Breyer is also working on just updating some of the policies to make sure they're all up to date. And so kind of diving in on making sure that our training, I think I reported last time, all of our officers met the required amount of post-certified training for the year. And so now we're working on getting into 2024. Other updates. We have very exciting news. You have one out there. We have the first edition of the Leadville newsletter. So this is a city newsletter designed to push out information about city goings on. So whether it's departments going on, events that the city is putting on, it's really designed to be very brief and to the point. And this one, as you can see, a number of the departments put in updates. We've got some on planning, streets. So this is the opportunity when we're talking about things like, is the public aware of when merchants or businesses on Harrison Avenue need to remove their snow? This is the kind of opportunity we have to put information out. Streets will probably have information going in the newsletter probably for the next few months, pushing out information so people are aware. We have one crew, this is what they do, this is how they do it. Not every department will have an input in the newsletter every month. The idea is to have it every month and have it be timely updates. So there might be things that we put in at upcoming issues the city council might consider. Things that we have maybe in the works that, or things that departments are planning for that we would like to let the public know about. So I would like to thank Mr. Cummins, who has been the point person on this. It is fabulous. I think the design and the layout, as you all know, we all have degrees in the city in graphic design, so, I think it's a fantastic start, and we intend to try and push this out. Like, right now, we pushed it out to everybody who receives the packets for city council meetings. But we're also looking at ways that we can push this information out. So my ask to you all is, if there are ways you think we should get this newsletter distributed, please let me know. For the newer council members, I stole this idea from the town of Minturn. They do exactly this. It is a 1 to 2 page newsletter that's very simple to put together. And they did a survey probably about the time I started about where citizens get their information about the town. And the #1 response was the newsletter. The second was the newspaper, and the third was city council meetings. So, you know, it's proven to be a fantastic tool. We will have, pushing out the digital version, we will have printed copies in the lobby for people who like still to have that. So we are looking for other ways to push them out. So please let me or Mr. Cummins know where you think we might be able to distribute them further. And if there are things you think we should highlight. I do want to keep this city focused because I think there are a lot of different newsletters. So at this point, if someone comes to us and says, I want to advertise my upcoming event, if it's not something the city is sponsoring or doing, we're gonna probably say we're just for now focusing on city stuff. Let's see, couple updates. As you all know, their wayfinding signs was damaged a while. So if you're hearing, it was a hit and run. The suspect, and we will be seeking restitution to replace that sign as part of the criminal case. So that is just unfortunate news, but I've been working with Sarah Day to determine, you know, what the cost was for that and how we can go about getting it replaced. It may take a little while because those were custom made signs. Let's see, a couple other updates. So the community center, some exciting news on that front. As you all remember, we did put some money in the 2024 budget to get some assistance in getting that project. We have lots of steps that need to happen, but one of the things that needs to be done is sort of the preliminary legwork, community input, so the back and forth between what the community would like to see it and inform the community about what we have and what's available, and working as a liaison with the University of Colorado students, the architecture and planning students. So the exciting news is, as of today, we have a project manager, Lauren Barrett, who is going to be, if you all know Lauren, she has some very strong ties to lots of the local community organizations, and so her role will be to facilitate the input from the community and gather that input, build coalition, work to develop a steering committee. So if you all know people who are interested in a steering committee, where we would try and work with the architecture and planning students to come up with a concept design of, here's what the community would like to see in the building, here's what's feasible, and work together to come up with a design that we can hopefully find funds to implement. So that's exciting news, because I think you know that it's something that's near and dear to my heart, but it's also been very, very difficult for me to find the time to work, you know, all the meetings and work with all the organizations, and Ms. Barrett has some fantastic connections in the community, so we're very excited about that. Let's see, the other update is I guess we'll say a law enforcement update. We are continuing to have meetings. I had a very productive meeting with the sheriff about working on a contract relationship with the sheriff's department. We will continue to have some discussions, but we all agree really that there's one necessary component that needs to happen, which is we need more law enforcement. I mean, the sheriff's department and the police department are down. So I've been working with our new HR director to come up with a plan for recruitment of police officers and a police chief. And so we are in the preliminary stages of that, but working with acting Chief Breyer to come up with some ideas that it's just not sufficient for us to run an ad in the newspaper. We really need to, many communities have put together and work with a consultant to put together a campaign to recruit and bring the right people in. And so we're working on that. I'm happy to talk with you all one-on-one about what that is, but it is targeting the community colleges for younger officers, targeting certain communities that potentially would like to, you know, officers who may want to come to Leadville for our, you know, beautiful outdoors, you know, maybe Eastern Plains or other smaller town communities, and also working with the particular job boards that are available within the professions. So we are continuing to work on that. I know this is a long update. I have two more things. Just a lot going on. Colorado Trust. So thank you all for approving that resolution. Our finance director, Ms. Eula, and I worked on establishing all that account that is necessary. We were, you know, interested in the feedback from the council on this. We will just be investing in the, oh my God, Dave.
Prime.
Yes, we will be investing in the program that just invests in government, you know, treasury and bond. We will not be investing in the one that invests in Fortune 500 companies. And we're looking, it depends on the fund availability, but we are definitely looking at investing up to, I'm hoping about $2 million. So that would be fantastic for us. The last thing is, this is just a little bit of something that I need you all to think about. The city actually has a board of adjustment. And this board is essentially one of the obligations of the board is to hear variance applications. So the city needs to convene a board of adjustment. We haven't done this for some time, but we need to convene a board of adjustment because the city received a setback variance application, which is scheduled for the March 5th city council meeting. And so essentially we need 5 of 7 council members to form the Board of Adjustment. And it is an appointment by the mayor. So what we would like to do is put your thinking caps on to figure out which 5 of you would like to serve on the Board of Adjustment. So generally, what we do is we have that during a city council meeting, but technically it's not the whole city council, it's only the 5. So we all decided that when we use the very scientific method of whoever touches their nose last ends up. But I'm bringing this up because our planning director asked you all to think about it for the next meeting, because we will need, it is on the agenda to appoint who will be on the Board of Adjustment.
Can I make a quick comment
Yes.
on that? Because previously, the city administrator is correct. This doesn't happen very often. We have heard variances before. And I think we just did not know about that particular part of the ordinance. And so the entire city council would just vote. But the ordinance specifically says 5. So 2 people can just sit and listen and have absolutely nothing to say when the variance hearings are. So please contact me in the next week or 2 before the next meeting, so we can do these appointments, because then we'll have our first convening of the Board of Adjustments in March.
So
And
you
you
want
don't
us
get
to
special hats or
contact you
any
when
other
you're
benefits than the glory. Yes, please.
Should we contact you right away?
Yes, otherwise I just. Okay. Anything else?
A few exciting things that might be coming in the next city council meeting would be. I think I mentioned previously that we have been trying to work on an ordinance regarding the carry-out bag fee. So just to give you a heads up, I'm hoping to have that ready for our next council meeting, but I wanted to do a little more outreach. And so I might want to put it in the newsletter or put it out on Main Street's email blast to merchants, but essentially, right now, there's a required collection of bag fee. We would like to have the merchants remit that bag fee to the city instead of retaining it, so that we can provide those funds to C4. So that's an option. If the city has those funds remitted to, but if they're remitted basically to a local government, it has to go towards some type of recycling program. The city doesn't have a recycling program, but that's basically C4's mission, and so we would like that to be able to be a way to support the good things that C4 does. So we need an ordinance to do that, and our city attorney has drafted one. I just hadn't gotten as much outreach done as possible in advance. I don't want to necessarily spring that on the residents, and I also wanted to make sure that our finance department can handle having that income come in, because I know we had that little glitch where we did the accommodations tax, where, you know, our finance department wasn't necessarily completely set up to make that happen. But that hopefully is coming in the next couple of meetings.
I will say, I'm employed by C4, but it is a completely separate department in which the funds would go to, for what it's worth.
Okay.
I've got one question. Did we have a chance to follow up on the idea of contracting for additional snow plowing? I know that was quite a discussion a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, and it is a possibility. We would need, what we need to do is contract now and not at the moment when everybody, I remember that our streets department manager, Medina, told me that the rates that he was being quoted were between $200 and $400 an hour. So it might be cost prohibitive for us, but we will continue to look into it.
Is there an option to consider contracting out just snow management, not during a storm necessarily, and save the expertise of our streets department for storms and rely on contractors to move piles of snow around? I don't know if that's cheaper or not.
Possibly, it's just, I would have to find out if, there's a lot of people who have snow moving equipment that we can contract out to. I don't know, so for the snow pile removal, it's it's different, I mean, it's a loader and a truck.
For 3 full weeks, the vast majority of the east side has been one lane only,
Mhm.
which is an emergency situation. But it's been fully 3 weeks, and there's been absolutely no remediation at all on the Upper East Side. I mean, from
Oh, right.
the 200 block up to the 600 or 700 block, there's just been no removal whatsoever. So I know they're busy doing something.
Yeah, so the way that they started on the removal of piles is that they, obviously work along Harrison and the major corridors as best they can first. But then the plan was they started on the 100 block of the, west side and then worked. And then on the east side from, working from basically north to south. And then the idea is to continue to keep working outwards. But in the midst of all that, they also need to sand and then do snow removal when additional snow comes in. And,
Understood.
yeah.
Is it possible to talk to the head of the streets department and have him work on public safety locations? I understand moving snow up an entire block, and it makes more sense to be working on one block alone, but you can't see at any of the intersections on the east side, and I'm familiar with all parts of the city, but the east side seems to be the worst lately. The piles are 6 or 7 feet
Yeah.
tall at the stop signs, so maybe if we just did the ends of the blocks and save the centers of the blocks for later, just from a public safety standpoint, there's literally no way to see if there's somebody coming right now. And it's been that way for several weeks, not just a few days after a storm.
Oh, and I exactly what you're talking about. I can talk to him. What I want to do is I also trust the judgment of a lot of these streets department folks who've been working here for a long time. And part of the question is, well, how come you worked on this block at this point and this block and this other point?
Sure.
Part of what they do is on the snow removal, they need to remove the snow from so those piles at the corners are not from the streets department. They're from contractors who pile snow up.
Understood.
And
Sure.
so what the priority is for the streets department is to move the snow from the snow storage areas because they anticipate another snow coming. So that's where we put the snow that they plow. And so I can talk to them about it. I will.
And that was done over the first week, and I
Mhm.
certainly understand the big snow storage piles, especially adjacent to Harrison Avenue. This is more of a public safety issue,
Mhm.
and clearing an entire block seems to be less efficient than clearing visibility at intersections.
Right, I understand, and I also like to defer to their judgment, because sometimes what seems efficient to a layperson sometimes isn't as efficient, and so I will definitely talk to them about that, because I know it's an issue. I mean.
It's just a matter of time until we get sued because somebody couldn't see around the intersection and got plowed into. So it's a liability for the city that I'm worried about more than it is an inconvenience of snow being in front of houses.
Understand, yeah.
Thank you.
And I think the streets department is doing everything they can, which is why I think contracting is something we should look into.
Yeah, I think we
Contracting for the corners.
Corner contracting.
We've also noticed some of these snow storage areas, the signs are on the corner.
Yeah. The valleys.
Makes no sense. There's also over on Fifth Street, there's a snow storage sign in front of the fire hydrant
And
by
then
the
there's,
Chamber House. And
So
that fire
yes,
hydrant
we'll defer to
was-
their judgment, but sometimes we'll question their judgment as well.
Well, here's what I other thing too is, I know that we have put up signs, well, I'll just leave it at that, I don't know that I would say that their judgment is where the snow storage signs went from. I don't know who put this there.
on that note, I don't have any specific complaints. So I've heard from many community members, including lack of plowing and ice concerns, but more so what I feel like is important is that at some point, it doesn't have to be this season, but at some point, we get together with Tony and come up with a coherent plan on not only how we're managing snow removal and what we're gonna do in emergency cases, but also how are we communicating this? Cause it seems to be like a twofold issue of communication, as well as, just general plan for this session. again, going honestly back to communication, I'm sure they have an internal plan, but understanding that plan and having it written somewhere so that if something happens to them, we have to hire someone new that'll start from scratch.
So all of the homeowners, to answer your question, do get a newsletter by the streets department at the beginning of the season every
Yeah.
year. Been the same newsletter for several years, but it is effective and it is their one outreach and communication.
And people value that, but for instances like this, I think it's still important to have that outreach, because I get the same questions. It's obviously not on the streets department to always answer to those questions. Some people could have just completely not read the paper that went out, or ignored the sign that says don't park there. But I do think it's valuable to still come up with a coherent plan, because ultimately it's still on us to try to find an effective way to communicate. And if that newsletter isn't enough to communicate to them, then we need to shift strategies to try to meet them where they're at.
Yep, and I think that's a good point. I think, that's part of the reason there's gonna be a streets column in our newsletter. Mr. Medina and I also had a meeting with, Ms. Skeen of the Office of Emergency Management to have them help push out messages for us during major snowstorms where we're asking, if whatever it may be, that, explaining that we've got one crew, they're gonna be out at 1 or 2 AM. And, if you're gonna park and you have a choice to park where it's easier for your street to be plowed, those types of things that, we can better our communication with citizens. And because OEM has, during the last few storms, they've been pushing out a number of messages.
And then finally, about the rail yard, we heard some public comment tonight about the city plows the rail yard as a courtesy. I don't know if that's at our convenience or if we're really working on plowing the rail yard. And if so, can we charge the developer escrow account to pay for that plowing?
That's a good question, and I think we have responded to the citizen who spoke tonight on every single one of his issues, multiple times, and, really, we do not have any ownership or responsibility for those streets, and so that's where we're stuck. And, we have felt like it's not necessarily the right thing to do, to leave them without any plowing. But the reality of it is that, they're asking us to come out and ticket or ask us to do these services for what would be city streets, and they're not city streets. So yes, we are plowing as a courtesy. The issue out there, and, lessons learned on some of these things, is the streets are narrow, they're very hard to plow. They're very hard to plow, and it is even harder when there are cars. And so what'll happen is the residents will email me at 10 o'clock at night and say, hey, there's not many cars on the street, come plow now. And they don't understand why we can't come plow now, because that's not, and they're like, well, tell us when you're gonna come. Tell us when you're gonna come and we'll move the cars. I said, well, when the snow is falling and it gets to, almost 4 inches, the crews will go out, but I don't know what time they're gonna get to any particular place. So that's the problem we're having out there is, the cars have made it difficult to plow. We are doing the best we can out there, and there have been particular streets that we've, been requesting to get particular attention. I think between me, the mayor, and Mr. LaChance, we have spent hours and hours and hours responding to emails from residents out there, and doing the best we can to make sure that they understand the situation, and we're doing the best that we can out there. Yes.
Comment on that same, I think that gentleman's issue to some extent was semantics, because the newsletter that comes out from the streets department, all of the plowing that's done in the city is a courtesy. It's not truly a requirement except for the main public streets. So it's a misunderstanding of the way it's done. They do it, they try to do it and will do their best to do it, but it's a courtesy. It's not a promise that it's gonna be plowed.
Correct, and just so you know, like, where do things fall on the level of priorities? You can see in the newsletter that just came out, and then the snow plowing schedule we mailed to all the residents, arterials that are important for health, safety, and welfare first, so Harrison, routes to the hospital, routes to schools come first. And then we get to as much as we can of residential areas, and then if it snows again, we go rewind and repeat. And then alleys, you know, we get a lot of concerns about alleys. We have looked at some alleys as more like residential streets, because there are some alleys that have come up that are the only access, so we're trying to balance all of that, and then, you know, we'll get a question about the food bank, you know, there weren't, you know, can we get to them before the food truck runs? We try and do those things that are like important to our community. There just are more requests than there are people.
So can we bring pressure to bear on the developer, since they're not city streets at the rail yard? Perhaps the developer would like to pay $400 an hour for private snow removal. And if they choose not to, that could be taken care of out of the escrow.
I can find out if we can,
Or at least it could be communicated to the residents.
Yeah,
I mean, off the top of my head, I don't think that's the purpose of the escrow account, but we can certainly, I mean, as you know, we have been putting as much pressure on that developer as, and an inordinate amount of our time. You know, to the point where we had to issue a stop work order. And, you know, some of those efforts have been helpful, but we have always needed to keep our foot on the gas with that. And it is, I'll tell you, it's an inordinate amount of time. And right now, the public improvements, you know, he just needs to get us the documentation to prove that they have been completed to, you know, the civil engineer satisfaction with that, you know, the ball's in his court.
And just out of curiosity, his concern about the fire hydrants not being connected?
I believe, I'll need to look on, I believe Mr. LaChance answered him on that point already.
Okay.
And
I mean, what do you guys do if a fire hydrant is out of order or is not functional?
So, Chief Boyle reached out to, Berkeley Water.
Mhm.
It's not currently their system yet until the whole system's in, from my understanding. Another understanding is that I believe Chief Boyle got with, Mayor and got those hydrants functioning again.
Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna hold on this because it's just a report. Do you have any other? That was a really big report.
we've been busy, yeah, a lot of exciting stuff. I mean, you know, I always bring, you know, bad news like the Tabor side. But, you know, I think there's some super exciting, I think you know that from the beginning, I wanted to be able to communicate better with our residents. And I'm very excited about this. And again, like I said, you know, Office of Emergency Management, this team came to us and said, hey, can we help push out information during these storms? So I think having better communication, you know, I've always felt like we needed better communication with our residents about things. So.
Okay,
Last point, can the steering committee for the community center go into the next newsletter? The steering committee request?
It will go in a newsletter.
good idea.
I think it may not be the very next one, but yeah, of course. Yeah,
that's
that's a great idea.
Okay. Are we ready to, I thank you for validating just this feeling I've had of being very busy. Can we move on now to, talking about holidays?
Oh, yeah, I'm available to contract to move snow at $400 an hour.
Yeah.
Make a little money, like,
At $400 an hour, you need to have a skid steer and a dump truck, so that has to be included.
I got a little aluminum shovel.
It sounds expensive until you consider the equipment, all of a sudden it's. expensive.
No, agreed. Okay, yes. Moving on to,
Moving on to talking about our holidays, because I'm feeling the need for one really soon.
Great, well, thank you for the discussion. So this is not something we will have a vote on, but we'd like to try and get some idea of consensus. So the discussion regarding city holidays came up, I believe, last year when the county and some other entities, court systems recognized a state holiday, which was Mother Cabrini Day, and the question came up, should the city recognize that holiday? And I think that what we decided is, well, we should just take a look at what the city holidays are. And, so as you can see in the staff report, this is a discussion regarding city holidays. In no way does staff recommend reducing the number of holidays. That is not what we recommend. We are currently, so the fire department's holidays are governed by their collective bargaining agreement. They are collectively negotiated by the union and the city. So we wouldn't be talking about those. What we'll be talking about is the rest of the city departments that are non-unionized. And right now, those departments have 10 holidays. And I give you that list. For comparison, I just had some other, I had the county at 15 holidays. The state of Colorado has 11 holidays. The federal government recognizes 11 holidays. You can see the difference in what we recognize versus other governments. I guess the question for you all to decide and maybe give some guidance to the staff on is, do you want to add any holidays? If so, what are they? And what year would you like them added in? 2024 or 2025? So that's, as you can see, I think, the cost to add holidays is nominal. I had our finance director run some basic numbers, but you can see in your staff report, if you add a holiday where the streets department wouldn't work, think summer holidays when there's no requirement to work, because they don't work on a holiday unless they need to. So if you're looking at, holidays in potentially late spring, summer, the cost is, just under $700. If the streets department does work, it's closer to $14,400. So it should not be, given our, cost of salary for employees overall, that shouldn't be. Right. So in the scheme of things, I have our HR director, Ms. Behill, joining us as well. We've had a lot of discussions about making our benefits packages more competitive, especially when we're rolling out the idea of we need to recruit for our streets department. We need to recruit for our police department. If you're thinking about someone who has competing offers and they're looking to see, this is, I would say, low hanging fruit. It is. And, one of the things that came up in our meeting today, in our agenda prep meeting is, from a perspective that maybe these are holidays we should acknowledge as a city government. And so they, I leave it to council's discretion as to which ones, but I think some are probably very important to certain folks in our community, and we should decide if we want to add some holidays to our existing calendar.
Do we think there's any benefit to just aligning ourselves with the county?
Yeah.
That's a lot of holidays.
Like more.
I don't know about the day after Independence Day.
Yeah, true.
They have a lot of days after. So right now, we recognize the day after Thanksgiving. I think that's good,
Yeah.
I would not recommend the day after Independence Day. I don't really,
Yeah.
Maybe, I think maybe getting closer, but there were, that was the one I was hesitant on. And Christmas Eve, sure. Obviously, so, yes.
I have a radical idea.
Really?
What if we didn't recognize holidays and we just gave all the employees like 14 more days of PTO?
Oh,
So maybe
that's a
not this
curveball I
year,
wasn't expecting.
but just maybe think about it, because
I
it
think
would
here's,
be,
I've got a variation on that theme,
Me
not
too.
quite as radical, but what about floating holidays? So we have 10 established holidays and then pick your number whether it's 2 more days, 1 more day, 5 more days, and let people choose if they want to celebrate Cabrini Day or Cesar Chavez Day or Juneteenth or whatever.
One of the things that I would consider also is that when the state or even the county is celebrating a holiday and the city staff is trying to get work done, suddenly they don't have any contact with the other entities that are on holiday. And so I think there is some benefit to aligning with at least the organizations that we reach out to the most, just for efficiency.
So I think, again, where some ideas I think are good ideas in practice. So, I thought I had a good idea to offer the time off between Christmas and New Year's last year. And, for the people who had to work, I gave them floating holidays. Our finance director at the time wanted to kill me because keeping track of all that and who took it and when they took it was a pain in the neck. So what I would say is, yes, I think that's a good idea in theory. In practice, it turns into kind of a huge pain in the neck. Because what happened was some people had taken it and didn't remember they took it, so they'd actually take it again, but then we told them that they didn't have it, and anyway, it was very good intentioned, but it didn't turn out as well as I had hoped.
I have a few questions. First one is, who are we trying to target with the recognition of holidays? Are we trying to target employees or like citywide?
Like hours of business.
Yeah, I guess like, my question is, are we considering this purely from a labor aspect, or are we considering this from like a community-wide aspect of like, maybe the community wants to have these holidays? I don't see how the community would be impacted from it personally, but it's an important question for me to consider.
Well, I think it's twofold. I think you hit a good point is, holidays are a nice opportunity for people to take a break and spend time with their families. So it's a benefit to employees. What I think you're asking is, symbolically, is it important for the city to acknowledge certain historic days, which is why we have holidays. So I think it's two parts. I think it's important. And that's why I said that some of these holidays may be really important to people in our community,
Yes.
where it's not the day off that's important, it's the recognition of what it symbolizes.
Yes, and that was, because I have two different approaches to both. My approach for, if this is purely for the employees, let them decide. I don't see why I should say, you know. If this is more from a recognition standpoint and from a general standpoint, then there are definitely some that I have opinions on. That's kind of why I wanted that clarification, so I understand what it is exactly that we're.
Well,
my following question then is, have the employees had an opportunity to give feedback and really, is this a list that we're working off that the employees have already given feedback, or would they do that after we give feedback?
that's a good question. We would probably.
Can I jump in here? Is that okay? So I think one of the biggest things that brought this to kind of discussion among trying to align with business hours of government entities that we work with during those days. One is how difficult recruiting is in such a rural area, and we are surrounded by, to be honest, wealthier resort towns. So we kind of need, for recruiting aspects, I mean, desperately police department, but just for ongoing future efforts, more things that we can easily offer that may not be completely monetary compensation. And again, the twofold part that Lori mentioned is what values is the city trying to display, and so what do we want to recognize as far as values and how we value certain holidays. Again, back to recruiting, I think the existing employees, we have not done a survey, and I would be absolutely happy to do that. I would be more than happy to do that, but we are definitely kind of going from a recruiting standpoint, just because it has been so difficult historically. So the immediate needs of recruiting right now and future ongoing recruiting needs as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, with that said, there are two that I feel very strongly about, that is Christmas Eve, because as a Latino, we do not celebrate on Christmas Day, we typically celebrate on Christmas Eve, and that's when we recognize that holiday. And that is very, very typical for our community. Juneteenth would make the most sense for me. I have others. Those are the two that I feel like are.
From a recruiting standpoint, our largest competitor for employees is our county. And when the county is closed and the city is open, we have people who are here who can't get anything done. It makes perfect sense to align our holidays with the county from a recruiting standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint, and it's an absolute minimal ask from a financial standpoint. Why in the world are we competing with the county on something that they're winning so strongly? We can align and make everybody happy and make it a little bit easier to keep our beloved city employees.
I like aligning with the county.
Yeah, I do as well.
Except for the day after.
I was gonna say,
Independence Day.
that still is just like, what?
Consider it a very, very small, very inexpensive bonus. And once again, if somebody's looking at a county job and a city job and we don't do that,
Yes.
that's the person that could go to the county. That's what we're trying to avoid. It's just makes perfect sense. We have too many people going that direction, not enough coming this direction. And we need to give them a reason to want to come in.
I don't want to lose the PTO point that, Councilmember, Tharp made. Mayor Pro.
Would that be something perhaps, Paige, that we could poll the employees about? Like, here are the things we're considering, aligning our holidays, which is pretty generous, reach, but, or like adding, say, Juneteenth and Christmas Eve Day, but adding some more PTO, like what would
Or
they?
a floating holiday or some kind of accommodation.
Something that would be less of an administrative nightmare and you're grimacing. I mean, I'd be interested to know what would, with our existing employees, like what sort of setup would they prefer? Like this predictable schedule of, I think the nice thing about Lake County's holidays, aside from the day after Independence Day, is that you don't have these huge breaks where you're like, oh, like we were saying, like it's 3 months until the next holiday.
Right. Well, the next one was, Cesar Chavez Day on April 1st.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I do think, and to answer your question, I think doing a survey would be great. I do think it's worth, to Councilmember Luna's point, if there are certain values as a city, we want to, make sure we have our point stood on for certain holidays to acknowledge, such as Juneteenth. It's a pretty widely acknowledged holiday now, or Christmas Eve, given our community demographics. So do we want to have those discussions? Floating holidays could be thought about, it just with more thought and structure. I would not rule it out. I know some organizations give you a floating holiday, but you have to use it within that month. So you kind of add a little bit more structure around it as far as administrative burden and stuff like that. But you do typically have to rely on supervisors to help uphold things like that, to ensure that we're getting the data that we need when, for payroll and keeping those things aligned. So easily an employee survey to give options and how those would look and see what people would prefer is something we can most certainly do. If we don't want to just align with the county, or if we want to just pick a couple that seem important to the city and the community, I'm happy to get information on all aspects.
So check my thinking here, but to Councilman Edwards' point about efficiency, does it make sense to have a holiday on which half the city decides to work and the other half doesn't? including interdepartmentally, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so I think, had to think through some of the ideas to figure out, because, you know, I think one of the things we have to think about is if we have the county closed, I know there was a lot of confusion one time where the county was closed and the city was open. And it was published in the paper and some people, including me, misread it and thought it said the city was also closed. So, you know, we had to make sure that people knew county was closed, city was open. So there is that confusion. So aligning with the county, I think does make sense on those because if other entities are closed, there's the expectation, you know, bank holidays and those things. You don't try and get your business license that day. If we did the floating thing, then we have to figure out how to cover it. You know, if we're open and half the people decide to work, but then the other half decide not to work and they happen to be the two people who do, you know, I don't know, the animal shelter, and so that, I wanted to think through that. The other thing about, and I think it was an interesting idea to say, basically, no holidays, we're just gonna give you additional PTO time. And I had to think about that, and I thought, why would anybody object to that? That seems, some people might object to it because they hit their maximum PTO. And so that it means nothing to them.
Yeah.
Where a holiday is a holiday, and they, you know, generally come at, there's some dry patches, but they come at intervals that work out. If we give some people additional PTO, it'll put them above the maximum, and some people are already at user loose, so it means nothing to them. And then we also are in the place where, let's say somebody decides they're a key employee and they're like, great, I have 3 weeks of leave banked, and now I have 2 additional weeks, I'm gonna be gone for 5 weeks.
Right.
And I wanna go on a hunting trip, and we're like, no, you can't. That creates that friction of somebody who's like, look, I'm in use or lose. If you don't let me take this long trip, but then we're out of employee for an extended length of time. So
Or
just
you're
trying to
having
think,
permanent,
what's that?
or you're out that employee permanently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is sometimes I wanted to play through some of these ideas. I think some of them may work better than others. I mean, I'm certainly not, you know, they're not impossible, but.
Note of holiday and, you know, recruitment, subjects. Another idea is we just align with the county and still evaluate PTO and sick time. I'm sure it's pretty up to date. But I would like that to be, a priority if we're going to be focusing on. I feel like this is more retention than recruitment, but it definitely serves both, right? So I love that idea of making sure that we're offering those type of benefits to not only existing employees, but potential new employees.
Well, the timing is good because we're looking at revising the employee handbook,
So I've heard.
line by line.
It's always fun.
Yeah,
Go ahead. No, I was,
aligning with the county makes sense if somebody wanted to do a floating holiday, take the day that's least important to anyone. In this case, it seems to be the day after Independence Day, and allow a floating holiday for one day to match the number of days with the county,
Yeah.
so that it stays on par.
Councilmember Hill, we haven't heard from you. What do you-
I agree with, Councilmember Edwards. I think aligning with the county makes sense, keep it simple, let's not complicate things too much. And as far as recruitment, we can show that we give as many holiday days as the county does, and that makes perfect sense to me.
How about you? Councilmember Edwards? I mean, Edwards, Thomas. I'm thinking over here and I'm looking at you.
Yeah, I think my preferred option at this point is match the county with the exception after day after independence and make that a floating holiday. Maybe somebody wants to take their birthday off or something. I like a floating holiday, it's nice.
I think it not only adds more days, it spreads more days throughout the year. So there's a day off in April, a day off in October. It's just a nice schedule.
Always something to look forward to.
Right.
For the floating holiday, I have heard organizations give floating holidays, 1 floating holiday per employee for their birthday, if they choose to observe that. And so it's more of the way it sounds and appreciates a person to give a floating holiday for something like their birthday. It's just one of those little, if we're talking floating holidays, a type of acknowledgement of a person as a human, someone that we appreciate being with us. So just throwing out another idea if we're talking floating holidays.
And then we can take a poll on how many take it the day after Independence Day.
Yeah. We're a pretty lean and small organization. What's the spread of our employee birthdays? Like, are we looking at having 1 month where half the staff is out?
That's the argument against floating holidays. Yeah.
I did actually, when my first week, I did run a report of everyone's hire date and birth date. I wouldn't be able to tell you, I remember the spread, but I do have that report.
We do have clusters, so, our prior HR director, I think you all know, secretly told me, some of the new people, I don't know when their birthdays are, but, secretly I had to put on my calendar everybody's birthday, so I could picture it Western. We do have clusters of people, but I don't think that they're all necessarily in the same department, so.
I kind of like that idea of aligning with the economy and distancing ourselves from the curious day after Independence Day, replacing it with a single floating holiday to, as, you know, in some respects, it is an experiment to see if even the administrative burden of that single day would be too much.
Right, so for 2024 or
Yes.
2025?
2024.
We've barely just gotten started.
Okay, so that, then,
But if you had your birthday in January, like, you're out.
well, and that's what we made.
It's a floating holiday.
Exactly, so we can, my plan would be to come back with a resolution, maybe even on the consent agenda, we'll get fancy. And, and put that on the next agenda.
Please.
Okey-dokey.
Great,
Sounds good.
thank
Thank
you, nice discussion. Hey, Christian, we made this decision while you're, no, we're.
No.
Joke.
Yeah, I was gonna say, great discussion.
I'm joking.
We did not make any decisions.
Some of our final comments were about aligning with the county, except for the day after Independence Day, and making that a floating holiday around an employee's birthday. Okay.
The other part was to engage that for 2024.
Yes, thank you.
I also think so.
Okay. Now, we finally get to take some action. Ahead of us, we have resolution number 10, series of 2024. This is a resolution authorizing the city of Leadville to purchase one Type 6 fire engine for Leadville Lake County Fire and Rescue. Chief Daly.
Sorry. I'm really glad it's too bad we didn't make a decision because my birthday's tomorrow.
Floating. Wait, but this doesn't involve the fire department, right? Because you guys had. Oh,
Yeah, so,
yeah,
so the management is not doing this.
Yeah.
awesome.
So, good evening. So this is actually really exciting. And for those that are new on council, I'll just explain my management board real quick. We have an intergovernmental agreement with the county. So what that is, I have a management that's comprised of the mayor, who is Greg Loudon, of course, and I'm looking for Barry Green to be a part of that now. And Jeff Fiedler is the county commissioner that's currently sitting on my management board. And we have one at large who's Tim Swanner, and he works for Eagle River. He's no longer a lieutenant over there. He's doing something else. He's a wildlife specialist, but those are the three key people that are on my management board that makes decisions day to day operationally for the fire department. Currently, right now, we have a city administrator and the county manager, Tim Bergman, sitting in until we revamp that intergovernmental agreement, and then it will probably become a 5-person board rather than a 3 with those 2 positions. So just, I want to give you that background because what we did with the management board is, and what we do with the management board, is we take all the legwork out of, having discussions and whatever council wants to do. We do all the legwork. We did the RFPs in December 15th for this piece of equipment. the decision was made by the managing board on January fifth. So they can come to you for final decision and go through the processes what you need to go through. So, this is a Type 6 engine. As you can see with the picture, of this vehicle, the difference between this vehicle and the ones that we have currently right now, except for the fact that it's new, is that this has 4 wheels and the other ones are dualies. So, when you're talking about price for replacement on tires, it's gonna be roughly about the same. These are bigger tires, but with the dualies having, a total of 6 tires, we're kind of in the same ballpark. This is gonna have greater ground clearance. It has about a 250 gallon tank, 250 to 300 gallon. I believe this one has a 250 gallon. It'll have a diesel pump on it and, greater storage capacity that we currently have on our Type 6 engines now. You know, it's just gonna be a newer piece of equipment for us. This in particular, is the piece of equipment that can go off the roads and get really into where we need to get into to be able to fight those wildland fires. This is specific to wildland fires, but, we also use it for, you know, transport of personnel between stations, or sometimes we'll shoot it out on a medical call or some other kind of emergency or something, instead of taking the larger piece of equipment, especially in those county areas where it's, expected to go. So, I'm really excited about this piece of equipment. We're doing a really good job of replacing fire department equipment, which is probably one of the most expensive out of all of the other entities. But as you know, and those that don't know, we received a Type 3 engine that we've been looking at for the past 7 years. We finally got it this year. And then, an additional Type 1 engine, that's that main engine that you normally see running around. It's a Spartan that came to us, kind of in a weird way. When we were out for the Type 3, we saw that one in the manufacturing facility with B&D that we got the Type 3 from. And we hired a consultant and everything to give us some feedback on that piece of equipment, and we were able to get it at a really good price. So that, and it met the specs of what we could use for Leadville and Lake County, because our specifications are a little different here, being at altitude. We need greater things, greater pump capacity, greater, horsepower, that kind of thing, because of our altitude. So, this piece of equipment is going to, let's just talk specifically Type 6 engines. We have a 1996, and it is a single cab Chevy. And that is kind of the replacement of that vehicle, if you will, if you want to look at the 30,000 foot view on it. And then we have a 2012 Type 6 engine, and normally these pieces of equipment give us about 10 years of life. So it's kind of at its end of life. And then the 1996 is way past its lifetime. The goal, the overall goal here is to purchase this one, keep the 1996 in the fleet for another year, just to make sure that we are going to be, and do everything we can for our community. And, having the protection that we actually need with 2 pieces, or, so the 3 will be in service. And then if we can meet the needs with the 2, then we'll take the 1996 out of the fleet and possibly make it into our utility vehicle. Because our utility vehicle is a 1978, so, and it has no safety features in it.
All right,
So,
how many of you were not
but it-
alive?
but it is an awesome thing, and I really want to actually. It's an old power, not a power. Really, so it's got like 7,800 miles. It's a great old piece of equipment. So this right here, what we decided is we decided to purchase this out of the fire fund balance at 313,000. Yes, wow, you know, I'm in wow over that kind of amount for this kind of piece of equipment, but unfortunately, that is just the nature of where things are at with pieces of equipment. Just to give you for an example, our 2016 engine that we got from Pierce was 670,000. That was custom from ground up. Now they go for 1.2. So a ladder truck goes for like 1.8. It is a crazy amount of money for these types of pieces of equipment. A ladder truck will get used when we replace that. So Please ignore the one. Yeah, we won't go there. So what we decided as a management board is we'll take, the 313,000, and this is actually historic since I've been here, to be able to actually just pay for a piece of equipment outright. I think that's pretty exciting. That means that we're in a good position, financially to be able to do that. So what we'll do, the fire fund balance, between the city and the county, since 22 budget, they put 100,000 in. The operational budget that shifts over to that fire fund balance. We actually ended up using that 100,000 towards the Spartan. But then last year in 23, we put 100,000 in there. And then this year in the budget, we're putting 200,000 set aside for those capital improvements between the general funds of both the city and the county. That's also, I've never seen that kind of plan before, and I'm very excited about doing that. So by doing that planning and then the contract work that we do from wildland and from aircraft standby, we have a pretty good healthy budget in that fire fund balance of roughly, if you were to count 200,000 we put in this year, over $700,000 in there. So we use the 313, we're gonna be somewhere in the range of 400-ish thousand left in that budget. So we decided to go ahead and just pay for this one outright. Currently right now, the type 3 is in the operational budget between the city and the county. And the type 1, the city financed their portion and the county paid for theirs outright. It was very supportive of the management board, from the city administrator, Tim Bergman, the county manager, and then overall, everybody voted yes to move forward with this purchase. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions for the chief? I was able to listen in on that last fire management board meeting, and I thought that the process of deciding which of the ones that were considered was very thoughtful and very practical, and just really excited. And I really appreciate the picture, because every time you use a type whatever, I have to look it up again to remember what it looks like.
That's somebody's
Yeah, she told me.
I can't be the only one who has that problem.
So I was gonna say, one of the things that I think is fantastic about the fire department is they do have a capital improvement plan. If you haven't seen it, we've gone over it probably every year, but it's one of the departments I'd like to see the other departments get to have a point where we have a capital improvement plan. But Chief Dilly has, listed out all the equipment, its life expectancy, and where we are on replacement of our vehicles. When their useful life is done, but also where, some of them we've gotten more life out of them, but the good news is getting caught up on that capital improvement plan. We're not exactly where we want to be right now, but the other thing about these vehicles, the Type 3 has already been out on deployment. And so what that is in the fire fund balance, yes, it's contributions from both the city and the county, but when there's a fire in another state and we have posted availability of some of our equipment and personnel, we can go on deployment to, fires in California or Idaho, and we are reimbursed for that cost at usually more than our cost out of pocket to go there. So two things happen. One, this piece of equipment, potentially could get deployed. Our employees get valuable training on this, hands-on training that they wouldn't get if we were just, trying to simulate training, and we get paid for it. So this type of vehicle will enable us to have, a replenishing of the fire fund balance. We send it out on deployment and get paid to have our employees train on it. So it's an investment that continues the fire fund balance investment down the road.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Laura, because that is a really good information for you to understand about what that program is and how and to give you a further example, the tactical tender currently that we have right now, it's on its last payment of $28,900, which all of those contract funds that we have through what's called a CERP agreement has paid for that piece of equipment of $207,000. I think it's $212,000. So that didn't even touch the general funds of both the city and county. And one of the most important things that you mentioned that I really like about this deployment is the experience that we get, because then those personnel who are fighting local fires know what we're doing. So.
Okay. Other questions, comments?
Oh, just a process question. Why do we need to approve this purchase if the money's already there and it sounds like you've been planning for it?
So, because, because it's a contract the city is going to enter into with, well, it's what is it? It's not the purchase agreement. The purchase agreement, right? So for, to cross our Ts and dot our Is before we sign it, we like to get it approved. It technically is in the fire fund balance, which is a different fund than the general fund. If something's in the general fund, usually, you've blessed it in the budget. But this big of a contract, we'd like to make sure you all are on board with it.
One thing that I'd like to really add, and I made a note of this, and that is, so with every bill, no matter what, there's gonna be change orders. So, I don't anticipate that it's gonna be much with this vehicle, because it's pretty, they have a stock mold, if you will. But there's certain things, tactically that we will put on here for our tactics. That we will need to add to this vehicle, so that might be a few $1,000s, and I'll just put it out to the management board beyond that 313. That will just come out of the fire fund. We've done that before in the past with the apparatus.
Last comments? Then I would entertain, excuse me, a motion, please.
Edwards moves to approve resolution 10, series of 2024. Resolution authorizing the city of Leadville to purchase a type 6 fire apparatus.
Luna Lel seconds.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Edwards,
Aye.
Councilmember?
I'm so sorry. And it's you, so you're on the HPC. Okay, Councilmember Edwards.
Aye.
Councilmember Hill,
Yes.
Councilmember Luna Lamb,
Yes.
Councilmember Best,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes,
Mayor Pro Tem Clark,
Yes.
and Mayor Green.
Yes,
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Yeah.
fantastic.
Thank you very much. The community, just served the community very well.
Thank you for the
And
clarity.
I'd also like to thank Lori for her work on this. She's been really engaged in this whole process, so.
Can't wait to see it. All right. Moving right along, we have resolution number 11. This is a further resolution authorizing the expenditure of a portion of the city's American Rescue Plan Act funds for employee retention incentives.
Okay, so this is a continuation of a program that we started the city in 2022. And this was really because in realizing that we need to be competitive with our neighbors, and at the time, it was 2022 and I had just started, and what I realized is it may take a while to do a salary assessment to figure out how we are best gonna compete on salaries, but we needed really to do employee retention through that initial summer. And in part because we were really down in the police department. We had 1.5 sworn police officers, and I wanted to be able to get through a busy event season. And so the idea was to use some of our federal stimulus money, so our ARPA money, towards employee retention. And I'm trying to remember the exact amount, it's about $761,000 we received in ARPA money. We've committed some of those funds to nonprofit organizations throughout the city, but we still had money left, and so we created a program over a period of 3 years where we would incentivize employees to remain with the city. And then in the final year, the incentives got to be a little higher. And at the time the county considered that, we said, okay, this is great for all the employees we have employed now, but what happens when we get other employees on board? What should we do? We said, well, let's see how this plays out, and we can see if it's working and if we want to continue it for new employees. And so this past summer, this past August was the first summer where we had new employees who had been with the city for a year, and might have been eligible for that, you know, sort of first round. And so I said, I had a number of employees ask about it, said, you know, my coworkers got these retention bonuses. I said, well, you sort of fall in the gap, and, you know, happy to bring them forward to the city council. So my recommendation is we continue this program for new employees as they come on board and they've been with the city and they meet the criteria going forward. The criteria, of course, we have people who met the criteria last August, so we would need to do that for them, but then this coming August, we have, at least 6 months of employment with the city, so it would be brand new people, but it would be 6 months of employment with the city as of August 11th. And then you need to be in good standing, which means that, you know, we're not gonna have employees who are pending termination or something like that, and you need to have been in a paid status. So if someone decided to take a leave of absence and travel the world, that isn't the employee who we want to incentivize. But the idea being that this, the ARPA money can be used for employee retention, and we just thought it was an important use of the money because what is valuable to us, as you know, you all know, we can have wonderful pieces of fire equipment, but if we have no one to operate them. And as you're seeing, the stress on our departments when we are critically lean, so we are critically lean, there are some departments where, you know, I expect potentially retirements. We have some positions that are very manual labor intensive, and you know, it may be that we want to incentivize people to stay with us as long as possible. So I think it's a good benefit. I think it's important to include the gap employees and then employees who may join us going forward. And so that would be staff's recommendation. And as you saw, the cost for adding the people who would have been eligible this past August is about $22,000.
Questions?
Yes, I know former council member Loretson brought up, questions about where the ARPA funds were at. Did we ever land at a good spot of knowing where?
Yep. It's in the staff report. It's about 245,000. That's my memory on this. I think it's, so where we are on the ARPA funds right now is different than what all the amounts that have been committed. So if we look at everything that has been committed, because some of the nonprofits were over a 3-year period. So if we basically just take the amount of money that's been committed and subtract out basically what we budgeted for this program, I think it's about $245,000.
That's on page 2.
Yeah, thank you.
So we have plenty of funds to be able to do this.
Including last August. That $25,000 we saved in the first 2 years
Thank you, Chief.
because of the church. So that's money that's already been budgeted that hasn't been spent. So we're not going above that initial budget already.
Correct.
That makes sense.
Correct. Yes, exactly.
Do we have plans for the remaining ARPA funds, and when do they need to be committed?
So it's in the report, they need to be committed by December 31st, 2024. So the end of this year, they need to be committed, and then those committed funds need to be spent by December 31st, 2026.
Okay.
So what we have talked about for newer council members, one of the things was purchasing, there's a parcel out in the rail yard, purchasing that parcel and potentially putting multi-unit housing on, or maybe not us, but envisioning multi-unit housing on that. We had approached Mr. Lichtenegger about that, and his price is a little higher than we could stomach at the moment, but so affordable housing is absolutely a permitted use under the regs. There's, you know, when the initial regs came out, it was very limited. It needed to be directed towards mitigating COVID and COVID impacts. Now the restrictions are sort of, treasury regs are a little broader, as you saw the quote in there that, you know, you can use them for damage to your employee force as a result of COVID, but affordable housing, acquiring land for affordable housing, purchasing existing housing, converting into affordable housings. I mean, Shaky Housing Trust has already approached us and said, you know, I know you have money left over, so we would need to figure that out, but affordable housing is definitely one of the thoughts that we've had on how to spend the rest of that.
So regarding the employee retention incentive, because that will be another meeting for sure. Other questions or comments on use of this fund or use of this money for intention?
Administratively, is it cumbersome to have to track lots of small payments out of the ARPA fund? Do we have to?
Well, we just did it once a year, so we did it on August 11th.
Mm-hmm.
And so this year we would have to go back and do the people who are eligible on August 11th of December of 2023. And then once again, this, I didn't get as many complaints about that as I've gotten about some other of my ideas. I don't think it was overwhelmingly administratively burdensome because we just did it on one paycheck.
It's processing one paycheck a year.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I think the reason I ask is because I think the county did something like they did bonuses out of the general fund and used the ARPA for a single block payment on something else, just to make it easier administratively.
I didn't get any complaints that this was administratively difficult, and I usually created a problem. This hurt my brain to do the staff report, frankly, but once you got it ironed out, no, it was just one, employee saw it on one paycheck in the middle of the summer.
Just a question about the history. This has been done only 1 year?
So we did it, no, we did it 22 and 23. And so the last year of the program we envisioned was 2024. To your point about how we want to spend the rest of the ARPA money, we could commit through 2026 to more of this if we wanted to, but I didn't want to have that debate tonight. I wanted to have the debate about, do we include the GAP employees? And then next year, we can decide, okay, did this go still low enough? Do we want to continue it for 2 more years, or do we want to spend the money to acquire that parcel out of the records? So,
But we're, at some point, we're foreseeing this incentive going away.
well, the ARPA money goes away.
Yeah.
If we think it's beneficial, some employers have longevity pay just as part of their handbook. We do not have longevity pay.
See,
I feel that it makes sense to include GAP employees as that's what this is purely focused on, and that it's okay that it comes out of the current ARPA. And that for the future, we should consider more sustainable, form of this, not in the sense of like the funding is unsustainable, we can't afford it. Rather a handbook written out process of long-term, what is our plan with something like this? Because I would hate to have employees who've been here for a long time receive at the end all this money, and then newer employees be like, well, what gives? Like that doesn't seem, I feel like that'd be the opposite, and it'd create some type of seniority feeling and antagonism towards that. I know that that's been something that I have personally went through various jobs that I've gone through. So I would say it would make sense to revise that and have a more permanent solution for what this is, regardless of what that means, if we keep it or not. But for the time being, this looks great to me and I fully support it.
Other comments? Councilmember Edwards, you're smiling to yourself.
No comments.
Okay. Anyone else? I would entertain a motion.
Lundalad moves to approve resolution number 11, series of 2024, a further resolution authorizing the expenditure of a portion of the Cities American Rescue Plan Act funds for employee retention incentives.
Thomas seconds.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Tharp,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Best,
Yes.
Councilmember Luna,
Yes.
Councilmember Phil,
Yes.
Councilmember Edwards,
Yes.
Mayor Green.
Yes. Great.
Thank you.
Our last action item is ordinance number 1. Series of 2024. This is an ordinance of the city council amending chapters 5 of Title 5 of the Leadville Municipal Code, regulating the rental, leasing, and guiding of off-highway vehicles. Is the first reading. And so we don't
Give
have
some
any.
background on this, so, over a year ago, but it was also our first ordinance of 2023. The city passed a moratorium on the issuance of new business licenses for the purpose of rental, leasing, or guiding of off-highway vehicles. And the purpose of that was to give us some time to figure out what other action we might want to take. And so, we are now at the point where we are considering an actual ordinance. And the essence of this is that the city issues business licenses. And currently, there are 2 business licenses for off-highway vehicles that do guiding essentially, I want to say. And the idea would be that this ordinance would cap the number of licenses that are available at 2. And along those lines, you know, there have been a number of community forums regarding off-highway vehicles and, you know, what the county and their thoughts about that. Really, this is focusing on one of the things that the city's impacts from off-highway vehicles are a bit different than the county, because the county has the land where the vehicles recreate. We don't really have the land where they recreate. What we have is the businesses. And so in order to get ahead of this, because other communities have been overrun or had lots of heartache over off-highway vehicles, this is to just get ahead of it. And as you see in the staff report, we're trying to balance the ideas in the comprehensive plan, where we have the idea that we do have a tourist economy here in Leadville. We want to do what we can to benefit the tourist economy in Leadville. However, we want to also balance that with stresses and health and safety needs of our community. So in this case, what we have are 2 existing businesses. So as long as those businesses continue to renew their licenses, they would potentially be the 2 businesses. Should one decide not to renew, then a license would be available, but any future businesses would not be licensed unless a license was available. Similar to the short-term rental situation, where we are deciding that a particular business may have an impact on our community that we would like to manage. And so I don't think that there's anything else that this is essentially first reading. My idea would be to, if this is, passed on to the second reading, that I would, we would probably try and put some input, or information out to the community that this is coming and that they can come to the public hearing. The other issue that I wanted to bring up that I almost forgot that's important, since our moratorium, we have not had any applications for any additional business licenses for this business. So we're not closing the door to anybody who's potentially coming imminently. This is just being more proactive. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
The existing licenses allow for rental, or is it just guiding? I've heard that before and I just cannot keep it straight in my mind.
Well,
There's no regulations of that.
right, exactly. So this ordinance would establish a cap on those categories, but right now, those business licenses, I could go look it up. I don't know if they have said, so when you apply for a business license, they might have just put down guiding. Because when you put down your application for the business license, you need to explain what your business is going to be. I don't know if they have put down the 3 categories. I know that they're doing guiding, but I don't remember off the top of my head if they also say renting and leasing.
Neither currently do rentals.
Okay, because I think that's where the community might see a bigger impact is if weekenders are renting and not knowing where to go, for example.
My biggest concern with this resolution is that it doesn't. Our two companies that we have currently do a very good job, and the guided rentals are actually very responsible. I don't have any complaints about that. But this resolution leaves the door open to having unguided rentals. And that's where I would see a potential problem in the future. Whether it was one of these two companies, which again are being operated very responsibly currently, or if one of them left and another company came in with the sole intention of having unguided rentals. I see a big gap here.
Well, it's not intentional, so I wanna just say that,
Understood, sure.
that it, I wanna get to the exact language here, because it does govern the rental, leasing, or guiding. So, I think that if you're talking about what you were saying, it would probably fall under rental or leasing, correct?
Well, it would, but this is only, the only thing we're affecting here is the number of business licenses.
Correct.
What I am interested in is how would we. So we're controlling business licenses, and I'm not worried about, if we had 6 guide companies like we have right now, we wouldn't have any more problem than we have now. But one guide company that allowed unregulated leasing or unregulated rentals, in other words, unguided, where you go in and you rent your ATV and have at it, kids. That's what I worry about.
So if you look
Future
at,
ones.
right, so if you look at, okay, maybe we're,
I don't see that here, so if it's there, point it out.
yeah, so if you look at,
It says leasing or rentals, but nowhere does it control unguided rentals, which is my main point of concern and my constituents' main point of concern.
yeah, okay, so if you look at, so the page, the first page of the ordinance, if you look at the actual language that we're gonna be changing. So, paragraph H, so it says, as part of the city's regulation of business within the city in order to protect public health, safety, and welfare, no more than 2 business licenses may be licensed for the purposes of renting, leasing, or guiding. So if you're saying,
And I understand that, and that's perfectly clear, but there's nothing limiting either one of our 2 companies or another company that came in to replace one of these 2 companies from having unguided rentals.
I would agree with the point. I feel like the way the concern is
I agree.
currently guided to rental 0, leasing 0. And we wanna have control of saying rental 0, leasing 0, guiding 2.
Excellent put.
How do you feel, just as to be a devil's advocate, how do you feel about, say, one of the businesses is turning their stock around and purchasing new ones and would like to sell their existing stock? Is that,
There's no difference between that and being an individual and buying a unit. I don't know that.
I mean, would
there's
that be
control.
included under the leasing part?
Yeah.
I don't think so, and that has been affected for several years now by Elk Mountain. They sell their last year's stock, and there's never really been an issue, but they sell their last year's stock. They don't allow it for individual rental.
So I see what you're saying, so this doesn't include sale for that very purpose, is because we know that they may upgrade their, stock.
I guess
So-
then-
Yeah, and
What's
that's
the difference
business
between-
practice for that type of business.
why is leasing in there then? Because usually that you're on a purchase plan to lease a vehicle.
Well, I
Or is
think it's
that this a
intended-
legal?
It's intended to be a synonym for renting.
Okay,
Correct, and
So nobody can-
specifically what I'm interested in, or specifically what Ward 1E is interested in is limiting unregulated rentals or
So-
unsupervised rentals.
so what if, say, part H in that, ordinance said something like, as part of the city's regulation of businesses with the city, and in order to protect public health, safety, and welfare, no more than 2 businesses may be licensed for the purpose of guiding of OHVs within the city. There shall be no allowed businesses for renting or leasing of same.
Renting or leasing would be prohibited.
Right.
I think that's excellent language, and that's exactly my point. Yeah, thank you.
Would,
Yes, this is a first reading,
Yeah.
so, I mean, I think that,
I attended the county
thank you.
meeting today. And I talked with a group of some of the guides and business owners outside afterwards, and they really were advocating for encouraging more guiding, less leasing.
Yeah.
So I would actually be okay with more than 2 guiding business licenses, because the more people participating in guided activities, they're gonna operate more responsibly, those businesses are gonna create more jobs. I think it's a sounder way to engage with that activity. So, their biggest concern was if there are not enough guiding services to fulfill demand, rental companies might open up and more visitors are gonna be renting, OHVs and using them on their own. And maybe not in city limits, but outside of city limits.
Well,
So
couldn't,
they advocated to me that we should consider promoting more guided activity.
couldn't a business that wanted to do this just open up outside the city limits?
Well, and they will,
Yeah.
of course, that's the loophole.
Well,
But the language of prohibiting rentals and leasing precludes really requiring only 2 business licenses. I agree with you there as well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind another. We certainly don't want to recreate Moab. But
what, I have,
hurt to the community is that unguided part of the business.
I wanna get back to Councilmember Best's point, is we're thinking in terms of they're gonna open a shop and we need to regulate, we can regulate business. So if they are saying, we have ATVs in Silverthorne, we'll meet you at this location and depart from there. If that's within city limits, we can regulate it. They're actually doing business. So
Okay.
we've had that happen before where people are saying, meet at this location in the city, and we're like, you need a business license if that's what you're doing. So even if their shop is somewhere else, you know, like, let's say they park on 12th and they unload everybody and they head out. If they're using that, then we can say.
Okay,
Sure.
thanks for that.
does our current business licensing structure say if one of our existing groups decides to, say, double in size because the demand goes up or substantially change their
We don't limit the number of
that's not regulated
No, and-
within our
and-
licensing.
No, but I'll
structure.
tell you, so, no, we don't currently limit the number of machines.
Mhm.
One of the things that some cities have considered, including Moab, was to limit the number of machines.
Mm.
And I don't think we need to go that route yet. But some communities have felt like that they're gonna say, and then you have to put in all kinds of, you know, but if you replace one for one, your existing stock, or if you replace with what, you know, so we have not gotten on that.
Okay,
And if-
I don't think we would need to, because I think any company that opens up a guided operation will be limited by their Forest Service permits and the new county permitting system. So their capacity, how many operations, how many customers they can have will be limited by those things. I don't think we need to then further limit.
Yeah. No, it was just more a question of what was our business licensing structure like, if you substantially change the size?
No, we don't count the number of machines, we don't require, you know, sometimes, one thing is to have all of the machines somehow, you know, registered within the city to have certain decibels, we don't do any of that.
Okay.
And we haven't, but the interesting thing is about the guiding is, you know, if you're gonna go the route of saying, changing it to be business may be licensed for purposes of guiding and renting and leasing are prohibited, you know, you could raise the cap. And say, okay, then it's 4 and see how that goes. I mean, again, this is ordinance, so it is a little harder to change down the road. It's not as easy as a resolution, you know, we have first reading, second reading, the public hearing, but it's not impossible. So,
What if we increased it by 50% and said business licenses available are 3? Provides for future expansion, provides goodwill, but being hard to change still keeps us with our initial goal of trying to contain this sports problem.
Yeah, and
Uh,
particularly since we don't have any businesses who are like
Right.
waiting.
But, yeah, and maybe the ability of another license to come in asks our 2 current guiding companies to reinvest and better their own operation so that that doesn't happen.
I do have one thing that I feel strongly about is that once we go forward, we can't go back. If we add 3, we can't go back to 2. We can, of course, but it's difficult to, as we've learned with short-term rentals. It is difficult to give the community, hey, here's 2, and then say, actually, we're taking this away, then you have the whole, well, you're taking my livelihood away. And, maybe it's one of those, tough crap, like, sorry, but I would hate to put anyone in that position. And I am hesitant personally, as the representative of my community, to go past 3. Purely from the standpoint of 1, no one's really looking to move here, yet. And 2, I don't know how 3 would look, and I would feel hesitant to go to 4, or especially anything past that. So that is my one caveat with, even if we do increase it, I would like to take a slow approach, which is usually not how I operate, as you all know. Take a slower approach towards this and, reevaluate at its necessity towards, this type of thing. That said, I don't know enough about this to say that I'm the arbiter of knowing whether 3 or 4 or 5 is appropriate thing, so I would trust other council if there's pushback against that.
and sometimes you just have to try something to see how it plays out. And, I think Councilmember Tharp's point about the market forces having some impact on who decides if you want to open a business, but you can't get the permits, and again, if we find that 3 business licenses is a ton of machines, we can regulate the number of machines a business has. So we can try and see how things go.
My initial thought in reading this was that we're granting the 2 current companies a monopoly, and that was the one thing that worried me. The second, so increasing by 50%, increasing by 1 business license shows good faith there and potentially eliminates that argument, as long as we stick to guiding, and add that prohibited language that Mr. Hill added.
And I think, just some phrasing of it, so if you look at paragraph H, it would say, I'm gonna jump to the middle, that no more than, we're saying 3 businesses may be licensed for the purposes of guiding, and no licenses will be issued for the purpose of renting or leasing. I think that's how. Subject to approval by our attorneys.
Yeah.
Just keep the grammar.
Kelly is not scowling. That is a good sign.
Is renting and leasing of these machines a thing, really? Is that what caused the trouble in Moab?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any interest in talking about, electric machines rather than gas-powered machines? They tend to be quieter and at least up on the east side, less polluting. And I think they have already at least some electric machines, because I've been snuck up on a few times.
So I, as you all know more about these than I ever wanted to know in my entire life. Yes, they are available, and some companies, they are, triple the cost. So they can be close, I think they can be close to 20 or 30,000. They're very, much more expensive. The technology is newer, but yes, they exist. And there was a fuel company in Moab, so to answer Councilmember Beth's question about this. So, Silverton and Moab have felt a big impact of the popularity of OHVs. And the communities that have felt the most impact by it are ones where you have people coming and staying in town, and then they're, renting and guiding or whatever it is, they're going through town to get to the trailheads, and that's and so I read about Silverton, But I have firsthand experience in Moab, like it is trains and trains and trains of OHVs, and we would not be able to have this conversation if the street is right there. It's there, because because OHVs are a cage and not, the engine isn't encapsulated like the car is. They're louder, tires are, bigger and they run at lower tire pressures, so they squeak, the tires are louder. They're just louder vehicles than a passenger vehicle in general, and when you get them nonstop down your street all day long, you can't have your windows open, so Google OHVs in Moab, for 10 years, residents have been very upset about the in health, safety and welfare thing was, literally we have to close our windows. It is, the noise really affects our sleep. And so what we wanted to do is 10, 15 years ago, when I was thinking of putting regulations in place, they could have put regulations in place. But then they got to the point where there's tons of businesses, you don't want to put the business out of business, what do you do? And there were just a lot of heartache over what to do. And so we're trying to get ahead of that. I think Silverton had record, 8-hour council meetings just on this topic alone. In some communities, it has been a very, very painful issue.
So we still have the ability to regulate the number of machines in the future. We do have the ability in the future, as technology continues to advance, to require a certain percentage of electric vehicles versus, but what we've done so far, sheer luck, is by having our guide services and having our guide services be under a bit of a microscope, they are incredibly careful going through town. And that eliminates a lot of the problem that's such a huge problem for Moab. That problem in Moab is primarily because those are non-guided rentals. And, you're driving a $35,000 Razor, you're gonna gun it at every stop sign if there's nobody telling you not to. So I think you've addressed all of those with these changes.
I have a ton of questions and comments, and I don't wanna shut other people out, but I do have a lot, so.
Go for it.
Okay. In no particular order, so the county permitting process would be transferable with the sale of the company. And so if one of these companies sells in our ordinance, would that business license transfer with it? And I would advocate that it should, because if someone has invested that much of their equity into their business and then tries to sell it without guarantee that the buyer can operate in the city limits, I think we would really undermine those businesses and those business owners' equity.
I don't think selling your business voids your business license.
There may be, depending on other regulations, extra steps the buyer has to go through to transfer.
Yeah, let me just look this up.
So in your, sorry to interrupt, in your code, there's already a section that addresses business license transfers. So prior to transfer of a business to a new owner, or the transfer of a business to a new location, the licensee must submit a transfer application and pay a transfer fee. So it's already accounted for in your code.
But they could, and it wouldn't be like during that process, a different company could snag up one of
No, it's
those.
a transfer, so no
Okay.
one loses a license.
Okay, great.
Well, it does, so the second sentence of that is for transfers to new owners, the city's approval of such transfer shall cause the cancellation of the prior business license. So essentially what you would be putting a new license in, and if you said, I'm gonna apply for a license to do X, Y, and Z plus A, B, and C, you might not get it approved. So that's.
But that would be a change of business use, so that's a slightly different application.
Just for reference though, we have set up systems where the sale or transfer, so the sale of the building, the short-term rental license doesn't transfer. So we have set up systems where the license doesn't transfer. But obviously for the business license, it's different. It can be transferred, but it really, the old one is canceled and you get a new one. So
And I-
if you apply for a new one, then.
I agree with that for STRs, but I feel differently about.
Well, there's a difference though. An STR is a home. And the
Yeah,
home
it's a
selling
residential
is
home.
different than a home is a home regardless of whether or not it's a short-term rental.
Agreed.
A ATV guiding service is an AT guiding service, and so there's no difference. Those are apples and oranges comparison.
I like it. Okay, another big concern that the operators had at the county meeting was that they need to be able to plan multiple years out, right? Like a 5-year plan. How often do business licenses renew? Is it annual?
I was gonna hit the button. I know the answer to that one.
Okay. Okay,
Yes.
Good.
Annually.
awesome.
I'm ready for the
Would they
next-
pretty much be guaranteed that their business license would renew unless there were concerns about changes to operation or, compliance?
Yeah, so the criteria, we had it in our business licensing, but yeah, I mean, generally it's a matter of course. So what we find is a lot of times people, the reason they don't, get a license is because they don't apply for it, or they screw it up, or they don't pay the fee. We have to hunt them down. There's a lot of hunting down, but, generally it's a matter of course. But as, Ms. Ty mentioned, sometimes there will be complaints about the property, if we have had complaints that the property owner isn't remedying, if there's a reason to not renew it. But if there isn't a problem like that, it's generally a matter of course.
Okay, great. How do e-bikes factor in?
So if you look at the definition of OHV, OHV does not include e-bike
Based on what definition?
in the ordinance. So if you look at the ordinance on, the page we were looking at, so if you look on page 2,
Okay.
paragraph B,
Section 3, that has definitions.
yeah. So, e-bikes are not considered an OHV.
I don't see that clarity in here because some e-bikes are self-propelled vehicles.
So if you, okay.
And there's I believe there are 3 classes of e-bikes, pedal assist, throttle assist, and maybe both. Someone correct me if they know differently.
Right, there, 2, there are pedal assist, and then 1 is, basically completely motorized.
That's an electric motorcycle. Yeah.
So,
Well,
off
there's a better definition, right?
of e-bike or off-highway vehicle?
Off-highway vehicles,
This,
section B.
yeah,
B?
yeah, I'm on page, 2 of the
Oh, I'm
ordinance.
sorry, I was looking at the moratorium, I'm
It's on
sorry. Let me
page
scroll down.
97 of the packet.
Okay,
The off-highway vehicle,
Yep.
OHV. And then it references a state statute.
and that state statute doesn't provide clarity on e-bikes. I have it pulled up here.
Well,
Or
I think,
Is your concern that e-bikes would be incorrectly included in this?
My concern, maybe not incorrectly, but I just think we need to clarify, because if certain types of e-bikes meet this definition, we actually have 2 e-bike rental companies in town. And so I think we need to be careful to make sure this either does or doesn't include those types of e-bikes.
so,
In the first definition on section 3, with the enumerated exceptions, could that just be added as an exception number
So
8?
that, I was wrong, so that's from the moratorium last year.
so
for the-
here's where I think we're sticking on this, that I think we can, be okay with the fact that it's not gonna be an issue is, so we're relying on the state definition of OHV, so that
Mhm.
definition there mirrors the state definition of OHVs. If you want to go backwards and look at what the state definition of electric bikes is, it defines them as class 1 pedal assist, maximum 20 miles per hour. Class 2, is really the one that is, electric motorcycle. And then class 3 is for bikes, which is pedal assist up to 28 miles an hour. So we already have a definition of e-bike, which is not OHV. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Should we put that more overtly in the ordinance?
Well, there's two things we can do. I can check with our attorney on that, but so your deliberations are part of the legislative history on any ordinance that we do. And so if we make it clear in the legislative history of this that it doesn't include e-bikes, I don't know that we actually have to put it in the ordinance, but I can check on that.
Okay. So, go ahead, Joe.
Sorry, just to clarify your question, what business license does an e-bike rental company get?
It would be a business
If
license.
it's a business license for e-bikes,
Yeah.
okay. But that is separate from an OHV.
So it
business
not count
license.
towards the cap.
But the e-bikes are rentals, not guided.
Yeah, and generally, if someone puts down a descriptor, it's not like a pull-down menu where you pick the choice, they would just write the descriptor down, so.
And if an e-bike company decided they wanted to include OHVs, then that would trigger that business license and would affect the cap.
Mhm.
So it would be
Yeah.
exclusive, if that makes sense. Please.
So continuing along with the definition of OHVs, if we go with the state statute, it excludes snowmobiles. So snowmobiles are not considered OHVs.
Correct.
And in our ordinance, it is also pointed out that snowmobiles are not part of this, right? I believe it says,
From B.
When we reference B, it looks like
it does not include the following.
It
excludes all terrain vehicles, which is,
Yeah, yeah, it does.
So- I think, is that intentional? Cause I feel like snowmobiles should be included in this.
Well, so we had this discussion on the moratorium, and we decided to not include snowmobiles. And
Okay.
the reason for that is snowmobiles generally, are not. Well, I would say we decided to not include it because it wasn't the problem that we were trying to address. We didn't feel as though. And I would have to find out if more often than not, the snowmobiles are trailered to their destination, or if they're, like, the companies are guiding them through town. I'm not sure of that.
well, if they're rental, they're typically not trailer. I don't know who rented and who didn't, obviously, but I can speak from experience living on East 7th on the 400 block. They definitely aren't trailered. Most of the time they just whip down or up the street.
And we don't know if those are.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if that's private use or not.
Those are not Elk Mountain, and Elk Mountain is the only rental company in the city limits that rents snowmobiles, and
Yeah.
they specifically trailer theirs out to Turquoise Lake.
Okay.
They did it one time, 3 or 4 years ago, but in the last 2 years, they trailer them out to Turquoise Lake. There is no city transit for the snowmobiles.
So that's just users. Yeah, that's what a
I
trailer
was
is.
gonna say, all the
You
people
can
who
tell
ride
it's
mine.
users because they won't put them out.
The county has included snowmobiles in all of their OHV regs. And, so I feel like I would need more convincing to leave snowmobiles out of this, because I think they have the same impacts that we're considering with any other OHVs: sound, speed, air quality, those things. I don't see why they're left out.
Here's a question, because obviously, other than not entirely legal use of snowmobiles in our town, if a company, say, rents from within the city limits, and then they travel into the county, they're still subject to the count, because the county does land use based regulation. Not business license.
Right, so if we're trying to address the problem that we have within the city, it sounds like we don't, I mean, we are not addressing a snowmobile problem because the only company in town that we would license as far as snowmobiles is Trailer and their snowmobiles.
Yeah.
So if there are snowmobiles, so we've acknowledged this issue is that we're addressing part of it. We're not addressing all of it. This ordinance does not address people who come into town with their own equipment.
Mhm.
We're addressing part of the problem that we can through licensing. What can we do about the people who come to town with their own equipment? That's a whole different discussion. So what I would say is if the only business in town that we are licensing trailers or equipment, I don't know that it needs to be, but.
But
that's-
under this ordinance as written, a new company could come in and rent
Yeah.
snowmobiles and it wouldn't be subject to the cap.
Yeah.
Because
Correct.
snowmobiles are excluded from this
Yeah.
cap.
Or Elk Mountain could change their business operation and start to rent and just have people drive out from their location.
Or sell, and then that new seller does it, yeah.
And I think that's why I advocate for snowmobiles being included.
I guess my pushback to that is, I still feel like this should be zero OHV, and I would hate to open up a license and then say they sell, and then they sell to someone who then says, we're renting OHVs. You know what I mean? So in combining them, it's obviously a change of like type of OHV, instead of renting out snowmobiles, maybe they sell their snowmobiles, but they see this as a loophole to access renting out traditional OHVs that we were speaking about to address here. That to me feels like it would then, we would have to increase and change the language of the recommendation that we made. Unless we're saying, hey, you guys can't do rentals anymore, you have to switch to guided home.
We've already made that suggestion.
For snowmobile specifically.
But if
Yeah.
we're using all these state statutes to define OHVs and state statute includes or excludes this or that. Can we, this is a question for Ellie, can we carve out snowmobiles from our use of state statute and say, oh, by the way, these two?
Well, can I offer a suggestion?
Yeah.
Why don't we just in paragraph H, instead of messing with the definition of off-highway vehicles, well, I guess we would have to take it out. I was gonna say, no, we would have to take it out. I was just gonna say we could add in paragraph H, the word snowmobiles after off-highway vehicles, but then it would be contradictory if we had it in the definition. So we could do that. We could take it out of the definition and then specify it up in paragraph H that includes snowmobiles.
But I guess my question is because we've defined it as defined by state statute.
We would have to
So-
take out the reference to state
Okay.
statute.
Okay, and that's,
And Ellie, right then and tell us if we're way
Yeah.
off base.
Yeah, you can. I mean, there's several references to statute here, so it might be cleaner to have something that's regulating off-highway vehicles and something that's regulating snowmobiles. If we're gonna use the state statute references instead of kind of using them, but then not really using them, if we're making a deletion from something that's explicitly excluded in state statute. You can. It's not gonna be consistent with the statute.
so maybe leave this as it is and then consider an additional ordinance modeled after this one, but replacing OHVs with snowmobiles.
I don't think we have to do another ordinance. I think we could say. Ellie, what do you think about if we said at the end, in paragraph H, notwithstanding the definition of off-highway vehicles in state statute, blah, 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 this ordinance includes snowmobiles.
I think that's fine. Yeah.
I guess
That's cool.
my one concern still goes back to. If we're doing that, we have a in-town operating rental. Then we open up one,
We do? Are you saying we do have that, Christian?
we have one snowmobile operating rental business, is that correct?
They're guided.
They're
We
guided,
have a guided,
okay, they're not rental.
they're guided only. We don't have any
Okay.
rental business.
Sorry, I misinterpreted that. That makes a lot more sense to me now as Cause I had understood that they were rented, my bad. No, my concerns are.
So that's, the language would be, and
I just
so
didn't
I'm
want
gonna
to-
do it slowly. So the language would say, then, if we're looking at paragraph H, starting with no more than 3 businesses may be licensed for the purpose of guiding of off-highway vehicles within the city. Notwithstanding something along the lines, notwithstanding the, state definition of off-highway vehicles, this ordinance includes snowmobiles. And no licenses would be issued for the purpose of renting or leasing off-highway vehicles and snowmobiles.
Unguided. Renting or leasing unguided.
Well, renting or leasing is unguided.
Yeah.
I don't.
Do we have to change the
That's
title
one
of the
specified.
ordinance then?
Thank you.
Wouldn't you have to change part B that excludes snowmobiles and riding?
Well, that's what we're saying, as the sentence says, notwithstanding that state definition, we're not going to, we are,
Okay.
Second.
yeah, we would have to change the title. But this is.
This is
This is
first
first
reading.
reading.
This is where
So
we do this.
I do have one suggestion. Not to throw a wrench in things or just to point something out, but the snowmobiles are included. I believe if I'm reading this correctly, actually in all-terrain vehicles, not. So the definition of OHV excludes all-terrain vehicles that are defined as part of the definition of OHV. So another
Yeah.
suggestion would be to include all-terrain vehicles in your ordinance. Or if you only want to address snowmobiles, notwithstanding the definition of all-terrain vehicles, this ordinance includes snowmobiles.
Yeah, including all kinds of vehicles, because that would also then by definition include ATVs. Yeah.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next point, in fact, is that this currently also excludes ATVs, which I think we want to.
And in a rental environment, ATVs are as popular as
Mhm.
OHVs are, so including all terrain vehicles. Her suggestion would be smart and would cover a lot more bases.
I think so too.
I would say from a public safety standpoint, in the emergency room, I see a ton more ATV accidents.
Yeah, no cage, no seatbelt. And, yeah, in a rental environment, they're incredibly popular. But that would lump in with your snowmobiles and would solve 2 problems.
Yeah, I like that.
I feel comfortable with that.
Me too.
And then the title could be OHV and ATV.
Thoughts?
And
I need to look at this a little more carefully and spend a little more time. I think it will determine whether it needs to say all terrain vehicles and snowmobiles, because I'm not, we'll just double check to see if all terrain includes
And if
snowmobiles.
it doesn't, tagging that along doesn't change anything else.
No.
Including both of those solves 3 problems.
And it is included specifically in the state statute, CRS
And we would-
42-6-102.
A perhaps unintended consequences that would also include golf carts.
I don't think that we would solve him. What space?
Golf carts
So-
are extreme view.
What happens is you get a.
That's defined by state statute.
The rail yard,
Mhm.
and they're just far enough away from downtown that they start buying golf carts because they're not licensed and they can drive them downtown to go to dinner. It's a problem in other communities.
Sounds like. work.
Just looking at the,
I think that's additionally. If I'm reading that correctly.
Yeah.
All-terrain vehicles.
As-
I totally agree with the concept.
maybe,
Does it
Yeah.
also include boats?
I was.
It's actually hard to hear when, on the owl, when a bunch of people are talking at the same time, so are we debating still?
Councilmember Best brought up a point, and maybe you or Ellie could clarify this, but right now in paragraph B, when it says currently defines as excluding all terrain vehicles as defined in CRS, blah, 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 comma, vehicles designed and used primarily for travel on, over, or in the water, snowmobiles, golf carts, vehicles designed and used to carry individuals with disabilities. Then it mentions agricultural, logging and mining vehicles. Are those included under the state's definition of ATVs, or are those listed in addition to the state's definition of ATVs?
While someone else is looking that up, I can say, I am assuming it's city council's intention to not include those in this ordinance.
Except snowmobiles.
Right.
Right, no, I understand
Correct.
that.
Yeah, but I mean, if we were talking about how, oh, if we just do, let's just make it ATVs, like, are we unintentionally including these other vehicles that we may not necessarily want to include?
But so that was my question back to you, is it your intention to not include those vehicles?
Yeah, the
Yes.
agricultural vehicles, logging vehicles, that kind of stuff.
And vehicles designed to carry individuals with disability. I do want to be clear that you do not want to include those because we can find a way to draft around that. That's, the bottom line is whether or not it's included in the definition of all terrain.
I think we just need, we want ATVs and snowmobiles included.
Right.
And
Yeah.
not the others.
Not any of the other stuff.
Yeah, so that was my question is that other stuff in the CRS as an all-terrain vehicle, or are they separate?
Look at
Yeah.
that.
So I believe it's actually separate,
Okay.
but, you know, we're getting into the weeds of the statutes, which means, I'm gonna be more comfortable if we're getting into the weeds of the statute, just doing a closer reading, not during the meeting.
Well, I think I wanted to be sure if
Yeah.
we express our intent is to include in this ordinance to regulate OHVs, we want to include snowmobiles and ATVs.
So I
That-
think I might have
I
been
just want to
mistaken.
express what the intent is, and that we're not specifically meaning logging or mining.
For vehicles
Yeah.
for disabilities.
So
Right.
Right, so that's why I was asking your intent, because we'll find a way to draft that intent and then.
Okay, all right.
Second reading.
So in looking at I have the statute pulled up, but I'm thinking that ATVs are separate, and then all of those other items are separately defined in statute, but again, it would go back to your intent, as Lori mentioned, and if we're getting into the weeds of the statute, might need to take a little more time just to make sure we get that right.
Great.
Okay, Steve, because this is just first reading, it's just a discussion, we will absolutely and are required to have public comment for second reading. And second reading is not where we, you know, like, that's not a done deal. If public comment is compelling, we can then further it and push it on to third reading too.
Certainly.
Cisco, you have a list. I'm looking
Okay,
at this.
we're getting through it though, for sure. I appreciate the dialogue. How does zoning play in? Where can these businesses be open? Or where are they used by right, used by condition?
So that is governed by our table of uses, and our planning director's not here. But just so you know that some communities have used planning to regulate OHVs and ATVs. It's a little more cumbersome. I can find out where they're permitted, but I'm suspecting the retail corridor, commercial. DC, transitional commercial.
And that's one block off. Typically. Which is another automatically limiting factor, and there's nowhere to rent to be able to do this.
Yeah, correct. I think that's all my questions, and I just have two opinions to pass on, which is I reached out to Adam Bouchard with the tourism panel and wanted his thoughts from a tourism perspective, and he said this didn't sound any alarm bells for him, and it seemed reasonable that a city of our size would limit the amount of these types of operations. So I wanted to get the tourism perspective on that, or at least his tourism perspective. And secondly, today at the county meeting, And Schneider told me she was able to briefly look at our ordinance and it seemed in line with the goals of the county. And I know that some of the county leadership wants to digest this a little more and just think about if there's any points of tension or, between these things, but I felt like that was a good sign from Anne that it's not wildly deviant or something. But I certainly want to advocate for reaching out to the existing companies in town, finding out what their thoughts are on this matter, and having some voice from the county involved too, because it's pretty complicated stuff. I feel like there could be blind spots where it's like, well, how does that doesn't actually line up, or, you know, I just want to hear those voices as part of this discussion.
Yeah, even if it's not necessarily they come to our meeting, our second reading, but maybe they express, someone reaches out, whoever it may be, to them to get their opinion. I would love to have that feedback. I know that is something that I have heard also that they felt like was lacking through other processes, that the intentional reach out to get their intentional input, even if it's outside of the second reading.
Yeah, I thought about that because we talked about that, when I said this was coming, and I wanted to not waste their time. I think if we had substantial changes on first reading, I think I fully intend to invite them to the second reading, because I think this is closer to something that, by second reading, that's closer to something the council is definitely considering, and that we would want their input on that version.
Yes, so I think maybe with second reading, we reach out to county, I mean, Ting's here. Reach out to her and to Eagle Mountain, and I imagine they would want to attend as well.
You know, and it's not, I don't think lost on them, I think that the council member who pointed out that it is creating a monopoly for them in some sense, except for granting one more license. You know, I don't think we're creating a hardship.
Exactly.
I want to clarify that one more license piece. Does that mean we're going up to 4 if we're including snowmobiles and we have 3 and they're all 3 are?
There are only 2 currently.
Correct, right,
But if we
right,
include
but
snowmobiles, there's 3.
yeah, but if we
Well,
include.
but the business license, Elk Mountain is the one we're talking about, and they do OHVs and snowmobiles. under the current
Okay,
business
so they
license.
already.
So there are not currently 3, there are currently 2.
2 regardless, okay,
So we'd still be adding 50% capacity by adding.
thank you. Thanks for clarification.
Holy cow, that was a fantastic discussion. I really appreciate the thoughtful comments that all you guys brought forward. Is there any last comment before, staff, do you guys feel clear on the directions that we would like to see changed? Yeah.
Yes, I think it's pretty clear. I think the only thing we need to figure out is the definition on ATVs,
Okay.
so.
Do we have? Sorry, go ahead. Do we have to change the motion?
As amended?
Well, no, I think you can, Ellie, I think you can say the modifications that we've discussed because we've had first readings where we have had suggested changes. So with the changes, I would say, yes, you modify the motion to include the changes suggested by council. Will that work?
That's perfect.
Excellent. So does anyone want to tackle that minor modification to what's already a pretty long motion?
Like, we'll move to adopt, I'm not gonna get into.
Councilman Pam?
Are you entertaining the motion?
I am entertaining a motion. I want you to run with that, please.
Let's adopt ordinance number 1, series of 2024. Amending chapter 5.04 or title 5 of the Leadville Municipal Code, regulating the rental, leasing, or guiding of off-highway vehicles within the city of Leadville, with suggested changes by council on first reading. I further move to schedule a second reading for city council's regular meeting on March 19th, 2024.
Edwards seconds.
Well done. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Edwards, I'm
Yes.
so sorry, council member.
Yes.
This is gonna be an ongoing.
Councilmember Hill,
Yes.
Councilmember Pinawel.
Yes.
Councilmember Best,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Tharp,
Yes.
Mayor Reed.
Yes. All right, I'm also trying to hold myself back from answering as soon as I hear Mayor Pro Tem say something. So
That's still a weird.
It's a weird phase. Okay, well, that was really great. Thank you so much. Let's go on to public comments, please.
All right, I have to get up here and.
I think probably the owl can hear you just as well. They just can't see. Actually, no, and you're on camera, so I think you're fine.
Okay, so it's, 1 to 6 now. Not limited, but especially 1 block eastward from Harrison Avenue. Ward 1 City Council Member Joey Udner receives a possible city liability for the storage of snow on city street corners, as the piles can be 7 foot tall or higher, thereby creating a visual barrier to oncoming street vehicular traffic approaching street intersections, creating a possible lethal hazard for the public. On council discussion, it appears that to address such problem, there are in some locations middle of the block dedicated snow storage space. Yet apparently there are dedicated snow storage spots both on street corners and possibly over top fire hydrants. Further, it appears that snow removal contractors utilize city street corners for snow storage for removal by the city as a matter of their standard operating procedure, irregardless of whether it is a dedicated snow storage spot or not. That's a minute. The idea stated by City Council Administrator, City Administrator Simpson, weekly paraphrase, is that the street department needs to be strongly involved in these considerations. So I say we need to implement that. And 2, map all dedicated snow storage areas, that is those dedicated with signage, reevaluate those areas, and unless there is a compelling reason, do away with dedicated snow storage areas on street corners and rededicate such to a middle of the block area. 3, affect public education via mail letters for these concerns. 4, affect an ordinance to sanction contractors or residents who store snow in other than those dedicated spots. 5, for snow taken from private driveways for snow storage on the streets in those dedicated areas, we should mandate a licensing fee for the property owner. The reason of that is my one neighbor has like a double driveway that runs the whole length of his property, and he dumps that on the right of way, and the city hauls that off, and none of my other neighbors do that, except, well, at least not that much snow in one big spot. I mean, it's one thing to kind of shovel your walking road on the street, which I think is against the city ordinances, but it's another thing to have such a big driveway, and the city every year is having several times a year haul that away. So I think there should be some type of square footage fee figured out. So if somebody has a single lane thing and it's a small thing, it'd be a small fee. If they have a monstrous thing, it should be a large fee, and it should be a cost-effective thing subject to reevaluation.
You are so self-regulated.
Can I have a minute to speak on this other topic?
Yes, I know that you were of interest to you.
Okay, so, when we were talking about the off-highway, vehicles, I was hoping that we wouldn't limit this. There should be a clause in there to, allow for further regulations to be added, because at the future, we might want to put transponders on these things, mandate transponders, and we might not be able to, because legally we'll be estoppel from doing that, because we already let them do this the way they want to do it. You see what I'm talking about? So there should be some language in there that says, but these provisions can be modified in the future for these licenses. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comment from online?
No.
All right, Mayor's report, I'm just gonna keep this short. We've already gone past my estimated end time of 8:30, so bear with me. I already talked about Rose Horning just got back from the Junior Olympics, and I'm gonna wax a little poetic about another highly accomplished Lake County resident, or now former Lake County resident, because college happens, but Nina Schamberger is now in Slovenia for the Junior World Championships for Nordic skiing. And then she's gonna return and go right to the World Cup in Minneapolis. First time the World Cup has been held in the US in about 20 years, and she just got awarded a start there. So she'll be racing alongside these phenomenal legendary skiers like Jessie Diggins, and Ben Ogden. So, oh my gosh, just the phenomenal accomplishments of our youth. It just floors me. It's amazing. The other thing I just want to put out there is, I know in the past I've talked about wanting to proceed with strategic planning for the city. So just so you know, the city administrator and I have been reaching out to a number of consultants, and I hope to bring that before you, like in the next couple of meetings. My dream would be to get this started in March or April. We'll see what they can provide. Council reports.
I got one. Today I had an interesting conversation, at my job at C4 with an organization called Cloudbreak. To keep it really high level and to the point, they are looking to bring legislation to the state to have solar gardens be 51% dedicated to, or 50% dedicated to people, income qualified people, low income households. I'm happy to talk more in detail with any specific person who would like, but I think this is a good opportunity to be collaborative with them and endorse their bill. They are specifically looking for endorsements, so I would love for that to be a conversation that we have at some point to be able to do this. I know that we haven't, in my length here, endorsed any bills outright. We have talked about some legislation, but I would love to see specifically for this, since it's just so low hanging fruit. It would have a high impact. I would love to have that conversation with council to see what benefits there are, what drawbacks there are, and why we should endorse it. The first half of my report. The second part is housing related. Specifically, of course, related to the Regional Housing Authority. As some of y'all know, I am no longer the president of the board, which does leave me with some concerns. A big reason as to why I wanted to continue being president is because I felt like I did a really good job at facilitating the ongoing balance of time and proper commitment, specifically from their current employee, or the only employee we have so far, which is Jackie as our executive director. Historically, there has been some confusion with projects. And one thing that I did really well was point that out and get council and commissioners both on top of that and to be able to have that conversation. I am worried that is a gap that won't be filled, as I am now stepping down from being president and no longer in any position in term outside of being a voting member. I will not have the time because I have other, things I can do in my life. I won't have the time dedicated that I did previously to be able to catch that type of thing, which can potentially put us in a somewhat vulnerable position, in terms of, we explicitly had funded a lot of money into this organization, and I think it's in our best interest to make sure that it operates appropriately and without current regulations and in place and internal bylaws to dictate how that properly operates. I'm worried that the continuation practice of just kind of swerving the board and going just to Jackie for yes or no approval of taking on new projects and to continue. Obviously, I have faith, hopefully in the county, that they wouldn't do that. But I still feel like that check and balance is necessary. And without me playing that role of president, I am genuinely worried that that check and balance won't exist. And without that check and balance currently existing in the Regional Housing Authority, it's just opens the door for the continuation of what I personally describe as malpractice. So I wanted to let you all know that that is something going on, and that also means I probably won't have that big of a council report anymore, so lucky you guys.
Do you have a recommendation to try to fill that gap?
I don't think you not being president prohibits you from expressing a check and balance.
Oh, no, absolutely
You're
not.
still a board member, you
and I'm-
still get to vote. It's got nothing to do with being president or not.
No, it doesn't, but it does have to do with meetings and how often I meet with certain members
You
of
can meet
them.
with Jackie whenever you want.
Oh, absolutely, and so could have anyone else. I'm just saying that because of that change, I am now prioritizing other things in my life.
Well, that's your prerogative.
Exactly, so I'm informing the council that I would like for that gap to be filled. I'm not saying that that's something that necessarily is right or wrong personally, but that's just not something I'm
If you want to
filling.
fill the gap, then fill it.
I'm opening the door for council to discuss this, and if you feel like that's not an issue, that's A-okay. But I do want to have a conversation about it, and I do think it is important that that gap is filled some way. I can't do it personally, but I am open to any suggestions, and of course, I do have my own personal thoughts of how we can do that, such as setting an actual process of how we do this internally in the board. That is something that not only have I discussed in length with Jackie, but have continued to work on even as not being president. I'm just simply saying, while we get there, because that's a long process, there's still a gap. And I would not be surprised if something happens while that gap is present.
Okay. Other council updates?
I've got a couple. I had the opportunity to attend the Saving Places Conference last week in Boulder, which was really good, all about historic preservation across the state of Colorado. I learned a lot about Main Streets program. I learned a lot about tax incentives. I learned a lot about grants. And I wonder if city council and the city by extension would entertain applying for a historic structure assessment on City Hall itself. The State Historic Fund offers what they call the State Historic Structure Assessment. It's a $15,000 grant. As a city entity, we'd be on the hook for 10%. It's a rolling deadline. They still have funding available for this year. I've looked at the grant application. I could work on
I'd love to hear about that.
it. Okay. It would be a good planning grant, and then, the obvious next step would be, to the extent that anything is found, we would apply for a much larger grant.
I think the only question is if we had anything similar, and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head if we have anything on City Hall, but stay tuned, I'll find out.
Okay, I'd just love to pursue that if it makes sense.
We do spend an awful lot of time talking about both the improvements and the preservation that we would like to see happen in this facility.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah, the next thing I wanted to mention was CJK Mill. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and CJK Mill had withdrawn their application to the state. They have now resubmitted it, and it's a completely fresh application, which was more straightforward for both them and for the state than trying to modify their existing application. So I think the city should probably provide comment, and I don't know exactly what that looks like, if we provide comment to the county, and if we do provide comment to the county, exactly how we do that. But I think the timing is right.
Typically, I think it would be Ann Schneider who would reach out for stakeholder comment.
Yeah. I will make a note, a meeting with our planning director for our check-in tomorrow, and I can find out if the county's already reached out, and if not, can we reach out to them.
Okay, and then decide a meeting with the county or some kind of written position?
Yeah, usually they'll, there's a form where you request other agency input. We have one that we use when we have projects that impact other entities. And so we have a form that we send out. If they haven't done that, because I know they've asked for our input on several. They asked for our input, for example, on the rezone of the property over by the animal shelter. They asked for our input on that. I think they asked for another project too, so we can find out.
Well, I'd love to be involved in the formulation of the city's position.
Okay. Great, okay.
All right, other council updates?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I had
Oh,
one
sorry.
more.
Oh, yes.
Going back to Mr. Prestash's comment, first public comment, do we have an ordinance against profanity in the community? I know the sign he's talking about, it's problematic.
Well, there's a lot of Supreme Court on, using, swear words, so I will double check on that, find out if we have an ordinance, whether or not it's legal.
I think typically, at least in the, like, the First Amendment stuff that has been presented is, it's really pretty limited in terms of like, has to contain like a threat. And, you know, where profanity is uncomfortable, like, for instance, in council meetings, we can call somebody out on behavior, but not speech content unless there's, you know, specifically prohibited speech that's included in that, and that typically isn't necessarily profanity. So, but I don't know about existing ordinances. I don't know how that works from a city standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, this is testing my, law school knowledge, but, speech is regulated in different types of forums. So public forums generally, or speech is more widely permitted, so your traditional public forums, like, let's say you've used a lot of PERC to be used over the years for purposes of public speech. We're limited in the type of forum, and so the, sign you're referring to is on private property, it's not a traditional public forum. You know, the speech can be, I think, yeah, the term is, Ellie, do you wanna?
You were doing great. I did a quick search of the code and I didn't see anything. The heart of what Lori's getting to is that it's a very sticky area, and we can look into it. We can triple check if there's anything on the books. Quick search, I didn't return anything. It will have to tread lightly here. It's and yeah, there's traditional. This is I know this is on the bar exam. But why don't Lori and I look into it? And yes, I obviously understand the concern. But I will say it can be an even bigger concern if a regulation violates someone's First Amendment rights. And I'll just leave it at that for tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else?
No?
Okay, any other council reports?
Mayor Green and I have met to coordinate schedules to make, just to foresee any gaps in meetings, and availability for mayor pro tem duties.
We made a new calendar that we've included Crystal in on for like if there's a signature needed and I'm out, she knows who's in town and who's out.
The only suggestion I have that we have Mayor Pro Tem Clark sit in on the agenda setting meetings for that Tuesday.
Yeah.
I'd like to try to make some before I'm in that role. But certainly if I were needing to run the meeting in Dana's absence, I would prioritize making it indeed.
Yeah, we've definitely talked about that because I know that meeting came as a real surprise to me. When I had to run a meeting for the first time, so. Okay, any other council reports? Holy cow. Public meetings planner. I'm just gonna jump in and point out just a couple things in March, just to work in the way that Google Calendars works. We do not have a Laura board meeting on March 7th. Those are every other month. So the next one will be April the 4th. So just ignore that one and the 7th. The other thing is that the St. Patrick's Day Parade on March 17th has the incorrect time on our copies. It has been updated on the city website version. And what is the update?
At noon.
At noon.
Yeah, my mistake, sorry.
I think that's about it.
Next week we have the 13th is the training.
Correct. Thank you for pointing that out. At 6 PM. Be here or be square.
There is no tourism panel in February, those meetings are every other month.
Okay. Anything else? All right, then. Well, none of us guessed 9 o'clock as our just guess of when the meeting would end, but it is 8:58. Council meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for your time. It's. All right. So when I first got my drawer, the great big match place, there were like 5 different pairs of reading glasses. And now.